The ground trembled as explosions tore through the jungle. Thick plumes of smoke coiled into the sky, blocking out the sun. Elias Cade sprinted through the undergrowth, pulse rifle clutched in his hands. The alien weapon felt unfamiliar, its weight awkward, but he had no choice. It was either use what he stole or die empty-handed. Leaves whipped against his face as he ducked beneath a low-hanging branch, his breath coming out in ragged gasps. Behind him, the guttural roars of alien predators echoed, growing louder. The Gyran, towering biomechanical hunters, were on his trail, and they weren't alone. He could hear the snarls of the creatures they'd unleashed, the ones bred for tracking and tearing through flesh. "Move, Cade, move," a voice barked over his earpiece. Sergeant Riker, his squad leader, was somewhere deeper in the jungle, coordinating the remaining resistance fighters. "They've locked onto your signal. Get to the extraction point, now." Elias gritted his teeth, his legs burning as he pushed himself harder. "Copy that," he muttered, eyes scanning the path ahead. He could barely see through the haze, but he knew this terrain, Earth's last stronghold, its untouched wilderness. The place the Gyran were determined to strip down and turn into their private hunting grounds. A plasma bolt seared past him, close enough to feel the heat on his skin. Elias dove to the side, crashing into the mud. He rolled, pulse rifle snapping up, and fired back. Blue energy beams shot through the fog, hitting one of the Gyran's hulking forms. The alien's exoskeleton flared with sparks before it crumpled, but there were more, dozens more, closing in. He had to keep moving. Elias surged back to his feet, adrenaline spiking as he charged ahead. The extraction point was less than half a kilometer away, but it felt like miles with the Gyran tightening their net. They were relentless, and worse, they had the advantage. They weren't just here for sport, they were on a mission. The ground suddenly opened up beneath him, and Elias stumbled into a hidden ditch. He cursed, pulling himself up just in time to see one of the Gyran soldiers appear through the smoke. The alien's eyes glowed an eerie yellow, its mandibles twitching as it raised its weapon. "Not today," Elias growled, squeezing the trigger. The pulse rifle fired, and the shot tore through the Gyran's head. It collapsed with a mechanical whine, its weapon clattering beside it. Elias didn't have time to celebrate. He grabbed the alien's data tablet, yanking it from its belt. If they were hunting him, it meant they had tracking data, and that meant he might have a chance to turn the tables. "Riker, I got one of their tablets. Might be able to jam their signal." There was a pause, then, "Good. Get to cover and send it through. We'll scramble it from here." Elias ducked into a thicket, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The alien text was incomprehensible, but he'd hacked enough of their tech to recognize a few key patterns. Sweat beaded on his brow as he worked, glancing up every few seconds for movement. The jungle was eerily quiet now, a silence that put him on edge. Then the roar came. It wasn't the Gyran. A massive shadow moved through the trees, larger than anything Elias had seen before. The Gyran had unleashed another beast, a different kind. It crashed through the undergrowth, and he felt the earth shake beneath its weight. His pulse quickened. This wasn't part of the plan. He watched as the beast slammed into a squad of Gyran hunters, tearing through them like they were paper. Blue blood sprayed the leaves as the creature's claws ripped into their exoskeletons. Elias crouched lower, his eyes narrowing. The Gyran had always seen themselves as apex predators, but whatever this thing was, it wasn't afraid of them. It was hunting them. "Riker, something's out here. Bigger than anything they've brought before." Static crackled through the comms. "We know. It's not theirs. It's local." Elias frowned. "Local?" There was a pause. "It's Earth's response." Elias's mind raced. Could it be? He had heard rumors, whispers among resistance fighters, about strange things happening deeper in the jungles, things beyond the Gyran's control. But he had dismissed them as fear-driven stories. Now, with the massive beast tearing apart alien hunters in front of him, he wasn't so sure. "What the hell is going on, Riker?" "We don't know. But whatever's out there, it's fighting back. Keep moving. Don't get caught between them." Elias gritted his teeth. This was supposed to be a straightforward mission: strike, gather intel, and retreat. But now, with the jungle itself seemingly turning against the invaders, the rules were changing. He bolted from his hiding spot, using the chaos to cover his movement. As he ran, his eyes flicked back to the data tablet. If there was any information about the new threat, he needed to find it. He ducked through the dense brush, the sounds of combat echoing all around him. Whatever this creature was, it was buying him time. But then, through the haze, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A massive claw mark, carved deep into a tree trunk. And it wasn't fresh. The jungle had been fighting back long before the humans noticed. Long before the Gyran came. Elias's heart pounded. The jungle wasn't just a battleground, it was hiding something much bigger, something that could change everything. And as the Gyran fell one by one, he realized that the hunters were becoming the hunted. "Riker," he whispered into the comms, "I think we've underestimated this place. Get out of there, Cade, now." But Elias didn't move. For the first time, he felt a chill run down his spine. Because if the Gyran weren't in control anymore, then who, or what, was? The jungle was alive. Not just with the sounds of creatures Elias had come to expect, but with something else, something deeper, almost like the forest was whispering. He moved cautiously through the dense vegetation, his eyes scanning every shadow. He could still hear the distant cries of the Gyran soldiers as the beast continued its rampage. Each roar and scream was a reminder that he was in no man's land. Elias crouched behind a fallen log, the stolen data tablet gripped tightly in one hand. He needed to get to a safe position and dig through the information. If there was anything useful on this device, it might be the edge they needed. But for now, he was trapped between a war he barely understood and a force that was beyond his comprehension. He peered over the log, watching as the Gyran forces regrouped, their movements swift and efficient. Despite the chaos, they were adapting, using their scanners to locate their attacker. Elias saw them set up perimeter defenses, spikes that glowed with an unnatural blue light, forming an electrified barrier around their position. Smart. They were trying to create a safe zone. But the creature wasn't going to be stopped so easily. From his position, Elias spotted movement in the trees above. The leaves rustled, and for a moment, he caught a glimpse of something massive moving along the branches, completely silent. It was fast, too fast. Before he could even blink, the creature lunged from the canopy, crashing into the Gyran's formation. Plasma fire erupted as the Gyran fought back. But the beast was relentless, its claws slicing through their exoskeletons like they were paper. Elias watched as the Gyran's numbers dwindled, the blue blood of their fallen staining the ground. "This isn't a hunt anymore," he whispered to himself. "It's a massacre." His instincts screamed at him to move, but he knew he had to wait for the right moment. When the beast finished its attack and retreated back into the shadows, he took his chance, slipping out from his hiding spot and sprinting further into the jungle. As he ran, he scanned the data tablet, trying to find anything useful. The alien text and schematics were a blur, but one section caught his attention, a map of Earth's jungles marked with zones. There were coordinates, and he noticed something strange, a section marked with a symbol he didn't recognize. It was far from their current position, deeper into the wilderness, but it looked like a focal point. Whatever was happening here, it might have started there. "Riker, you seeing this?" he whispered into his earpiece. "Yeah, I'm pulling up the coordinates now. That area, no human has made it out alive from there in months. Every squad that's gone in has disappeared." Elias felt a chill. Then why are the Gyran so focused on it? "That's the question, isn't it?" Riker replied. "They're either after something or trying to contain it." Elias didn't like either option. The Gyran didn't usually waste resources unless there was a clear gain, and they definitely didn't set up containment zones for nothing. Whatever lay deeper in the jungle was important enough to risk lives. He made a quick decision. "I'm heading there." "Negative, Cade. We need you to fall back to extraction." Elias shook his head, though he knew Riker couldn't see it. "I can't. Not yet. We need to know what's going on. I'm the closest one to the zone, and I've got their data. If we want any chance of stopping them, I need to see it for myself." There was silence on the line. Then, Riker's voice, heavy with frustration. "Fine. But you keep your comms open, and the moment things go south, you pull back. No heroics." "No promises," Elias muttered, already moving. He continued deeper into the jungle, using the map to guide his way. The foliage grew thicker, the air more oppressive. The sounds of the Gyran and their skirmishes faded, replaced by the steady hum of unseen lifeforms. The jungle felt different here, denser, older. It was as if he was stepping into a place untouched for centuries, a realm that existed on the edge of the known world. As he pushed through the thick brush, he stumbled upon a clearing. The ground was scorched, littered with the remains of Gyran tech and bodies. But what caught his attention was the pattern burned into the soil, a massive claw mark, similar to the one he had seen earlier, but far larger. It spanned nearly 10 meters across, and the trees around it were shredded, their bark peeled back like skin. He knelt down, running his fingers over the charred earth. The claw mark was deep, and it wasn't just a single swipe. There were multiple, each one precise. This wasn't the work of an animal, it was too deliberate. But what kind of creature could leave marks like this? Before he could ponder further, a faint clicking sound echoed in the distance. He froze, his grip tightening on the pulse rifle. The sound grew louder, and he recognized it, the distinct clicks of Gyran communicators. He pressed himself against the ground, staying hidden among the debris as a squad of Gyran soldiers marched into the clearing. They moved cautiously, weapons raised, scanning the area with their multi-spectrum visors. Elias held his breath, watching as they inspected the claw marks. One of them, a tall Gyran with red markings on its exoskeleton, likely a commander, approached the edge of the pattern and knelt down. Elias's hand tightened around the pulse rifle, ready to move if needed. But before he could decide, the jungle erupted with movement. The creature, silent as ever, swooped down from the treetops, its massive form crashing into the Gyran soldiers. Screams filled the air as claws ripped through armor and flesh. The commander tried to rally, but the beast was too fast, too powerful. Elias used the chaos to his advantage. He slipped away, moving swiftly through the undergrowth. As he distanced himself from the slaughter, his mind raced. The claw marks, the attacks, everything pointed to something beyond the Gyran's control. If this thing was native to Earth, then why were the aliens still here, risking so much? He pushed deeper, following the map coordinates. The jungle felt like it was closing in around him, every step taking him further from safety. But he couldn't turn back now. There was too much at stake. The truth lay somewhere ahead, and Elias was determined to find it, no matter what it cost. The air felt heavier the deeper Elias moved into the jungle. Every breath tasted like damp soil, and every rustle of the leaves made his pulse quicken. The canopy above thickened, blocking out the last rays of sunlight. It was as if he had crossed a line, one separating the known world from something ancient and untamed. Elias's hand remained steady on his pulse rifle as he moved, his eyes scanning every shadow. The coordinates on the data tablet guided him, but each step felt like it was leading him further into a trap. The claw marks, the attacks, none of it made sense. If the Gyran had come here to hunt, they were facing something beyond their expectations. But why did they keep pushing forward? "Status?" Riker's voice crackled through his earpiece, barely audible over the thick canopy. "Still moving. No contact yet, but something's not right here," Elias replied. "The jungle's too quiet." "Copy that. Satellite feed is giving us interference. No visuals past the tree line. We're blind." Elias paused, crouching beside a massive tree, its bark twisted and covered in thick vines. The silence was unnatural. The jungle, which had once been alive with insects and birds, felt void of life now. His instincts screamed at him. Something was watching. He heard the faintest whisper of movement. Without hesitation, he rolled behind the tree, pulse rifle raised. The silence stretched on, and his finger tightened on the trigger, ready for anything. Then he saw it, eyes in the darkness, glowing faintly. They watched him, unblinking, before vanishing into the undergrowth. "Something's tracking me," he whispered, barely audible. "Stay sharp, Cade. It's likely Jiren, but if it's one of those things..." Elias didn't need the reminder. He moved swiftly, staying low. As he continued, he noticed the jungle changing again. The trees here were enormous, their roots rising above the ground like tangled snakes. And then he saw it, a clearing ahead, where the canopy opened just enough to let in the dying light. He approached cautiously, every muscle tensed. As he entered the clearing, the first thing he noticed was the smell, like burnt ozone mixed with rotting vegetation. The ground was covered in ash and twisted metal remnants, the aftermath of some kind of skirmish. Jiren bodies lay scattered, their armor ripped open, weapons useless at their sides. Elias moved from body to body, searching for any clue. His gaze fell on a shattered helmet, the blue blood still fresh. Whatever had done this was close. He turned his attention to the center of the clearing, where something glimmered in the fading light. A metal crate lay half buried in the dirt, its sides covered in Jiren markings. Elias crouched beside it, running a hand over the surface. It was a containment unit, and the latch was broken. Something had escaped. "What are you hiding?" he muttered as he pried it open. The interior was empty, save for one thing, a shattered vial with remnants of a glowing green liquid. Elias frowned. The Jiren didn't just come here for sport. They were transporting something. "Riker, I found a containment unit. Whatever was in here, it's gone now." "Copy. Can you identify what it was?" "Negative. But it's not wildlife. This was something else, something the Jiren brought with them." There was silence on the other end, and then Riker's voice returned, low and urgent. "Cade, I'm picking up movement, large and fast, heading your way. Get out of there." Elias grabbed the tablet and moved, sprinting towards the tree line. The air seemed to grow colder, and the trees loomed above him like watchful giants. The ground beneath his boots felt unsteady, like it could give way at any moment. He pushed forward, heart racing. Then, from behind, a roar erupted, deep and furious. It wasn't the creature he'd seen earlier. This was something different. He glanced back and caught a glimpse of shadows moving through the trees, faster than anything he'd ever seen. "Riker, I've got visual. It's..." His words were cut off as he stumbled, his foot caught in a tangle of roots. He hit the ground hard, his pulse rifle slipping from his grasp. The shadows closed in, and for a moment he felt a cold, clawed hand grip his ankle. He kicked back, pulling free, and rolled to his feet, grabbing his weapon just in time. The creature burst through the undergrowth, its eyes burning with a feral intelligence. Elias fired, the pulse blasts light the dark as they struck the creature's armor like hide. It hissed, recoiling, but it didn't retreat. It moved with purpose, almost as if testing him. He fired again, and this time it lunged. The impact sent him sprawling, the beast's weight crushing him against the ground. He felt the heat of its breath as it snarled, its claws digging into his armor. Elias gritted his teeth, shoving his rifle between them and firing point blank. The creature roared, and its grip loosened. Elias rolled out from under it, stumbling back to his feet. The beast hesitated, staring at him with a look he couldn't quite place, almost like recognition, before it retreated into the shadows. Elias's heart pounded as he watched it disappear. What was going on here? Why did the creature hesitate? He wiped the sweat from his brow, scanning the tree line. He had a feeling that whatever the Jiren had brought with them, it had escaped, and it was far more dangerous than any animal. "Riker, I'm moving. Something's out here, something smart. We need to regroup and figure out what's happening." "Understood. But Cade, be careful. If that thing's intelligent, it might not be the only one." Elias nodded, though he knew Riker couldn't see it. He moved deeper into the jungle, knowing that the answers he sought were still far ahead, and that the hunt was only just beginning. Elias's breathing slowed as he crouched in the undergrowth, blending into the dense foliage. The adrenaline still coursed through his veins from the last encounter, but he forced himself to stay calm. The creature had shown intelligence. It had retreated, not because it was scared, but as if it was calculating its next move. "Riker, update on the interference," Elias whispered, keeping his voice low. Still no clear visual. "Cade, the interference is concentrated in your location, almost like something's jamming the signals. Be advised, you're on your own until we clear it." "Figures," Elias muttered. The tech issues felt too convenient. Someone, or something, didn't want him finding his way back. He moved slowly, weaving between the thick roots and vines that tangled beneath his boots. His eyes scanned the ground for any signs, a print, a broken branch, anything that could give him a lead on what was tracking him. His pulse rifle was warm in his grip, a reminder of the close call just moments ago. Then he heard it, a faint hum, barely audible, like the buzz of an electrical current. He paused, listening. The sound wasn't coming from the jungle, it was artificial. Elias crept closer, brushing aside a curtain of vines to reveal an opening between two massive tree trunks. A faint blue light flickered from inside the crevice, like a small gyron device wedged into the roots. Elias's brow furrowed. It was a comms unit, heavily modified, its interface pulsing with alien characters. Whatever it was doing, it was broadcasting, or jamming. "Riker, I've found a gyron comms device. It's active and seems to be interfering with our signals." "Copy that. Can you disable it?" Elias hesitated. If the gyron were using this device, disabling it might alert them. But leaving it active was dangerous. He reached for his multi-tool and began dismantling the casing, carefully avoiding the tripwires rigged around its edges. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that this device wasn't meant for communication, it was meant for surveillance. Just as he pried open the panel, he felt a chill run down his spine. The jungle fell silent, and a shiver of instinct shot through him. He ducked, flattening himself against the tree as the shadows shifted around him. The feeling of being watched was back, stronger than before. He scanned the area. The foliage rippled, and he caught the faintest glimpse of something, a reflection, like eyes staring back at him. But before he could react, the silence was shattered by the crackle of energy. The gyron device flared to life, emitting a blinding pulse of blue light. Elias flinched, his vision going white. He stumbled back, hands up defensively, as the light dimmed. When his sight cleared, he realized the jungle had changed again. The trees around him were no longer familiar. They loomed higher, their bark twisted and covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. It was as if the jungle itself had shifted, becoming more alien and hostile. Elias felt his pulse quicken. The coordinates were still his only guide, but now it felt like they were leading him deeper into an illusion. "Riker, status update. Something's off with the jungle. It's changing." "Copy, Cade. We're reading the pulse from the comms device. It's creating a localized distortion field. Proceed with caution. It's affecting your environment." "Great," Elias muttered, moving cautiously. He couldn't shake the sense that he had crossed into something much bigger, a game being played on a scale he couldn't yet comprehend. He followed the coordinates further, pushing through the brush. The jungle felt different now, almost like it was shifting beneath his feet. He saw more symbols carved into the trees, symbols that matched the ones he'd seen on the gyron bodies. But there was something else, too, footprints. Not gyron, not human. Something larger. He crouched, studying the tracks. They led deeper into the undergrowth, towards a dense thicket. Whatever it was, it moved fast and had claws like the creature he had fought earlier. But there was something different about these prints. They were too regular, too deliberate, as if something intelligent had left them as a warning. He continued, moving silently through the jungle. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to lengthen, following him like ghosts. His instincts screamed at him. Something was out there, and it was waiting. The coordinates led him to a ravine, the walls rising high on either side. A stream of water trickled down the center, and in the middle of the narrow path lay a gyron pod. Its hull was cracked, its doors torn open. Elias moved closer, rifle raised. The marks on the pod looked recent, and he could still smell the burnt ozone lingering in the air. He approached cautiously, peering inside. The interior was wrecked, shards of metal and circuitry scattered across the floor. But something else caught his attention, a mural on the far wall, painted in green BioLite ink. It showed a figure, tall and imposing, with a ring of eyes encircling its head. Elias felt a chill. The eyes were too familiar. They matched the ones he had seen earlier in the shadows. Before he could examine further, the jungle erupted into chaos. The trees shook, and the ground beneath him trembled. He spun, weapon ready, as shadows darted from the tree line. He fired, pulse blast lighting up the darkness, but the creatures moved too fast, dodging between the trees. One lunged, claws slashing through the air. Elias dropped, rolling to his feet as another sprang from the side. He fired again, catching it mid-leap. The creature shrieked, and the jungle seemed to respond, a chorus of roars echoing from all around. He ran, ducking under low branches and leaping over roots as the creatures closed in. His comm crackled to life. "Cade, get out of there. We're detecting multiple hostiles converging on your location." "I'm working on it," Elias shouted back, dodging another attack. He made it to the ravine's edge, sliding down the embankment and into the stream. The creatures hesitated, watching from above, their eyes glowing in the dark. For a moment, the jungle was silent again, and Elias stared up at the creatures. They stood motionless, their eyes locked on him as if studying his every move. It was then he realized these weren't mindless beasts. They were waiting for something. And then one of them spoke. The voice was guttural, like rocks grinding together. "Leave this place, human. You have crossed into our domain." Elias's blood ran cold. He backed away slowly, hands gripping his rifle. "I don't want any trouble, but I need to know what's going on here." The creatures didn't move, but their eyes remained fixed on him. "The Gyren have brought the corruption. It spreads. It consumes. Leave, or be consumed." Elias's heart pounded as he took in the warning. The creatures had spoken of a corruption. Was it tied to the green substance he'd seen earlier? And why did it feel like he was being pulled into a conflict that went beyond simple hunting? One thing was clear, whatever was happening, it was bigger than he'd imagined. And if he didn't find answers soon, he wouldn't survive long enough to uncover the truth. The creature's warning echoed in Elias's mind as he continued down the ravine, water splashing around his boots. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. He needed to think. He couldn't afford any rash decisions. The creatures had spoken of corruption, something the Gyren had brought with them. Was it the same substance he'd seen earlier? And why did it seem like the creatures were defending their territory instead of outright attacking him? The jungle, the corruption, and the Gyren's involvement. It all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle he wasn't seeing clearly yet. "Riker, you getting any of this?" he whispered into his comms. "Just bits and pieces. It sounds like you're making contact. Hostiles?" "Not exactly. Something different. They spoke, Riker. They warned me to leave." "Wait, they talked?" "Yeah, and they mentioned the Gyren bringing corruption. It's like they're protecting this place." Riker was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was tense. "Elias, I'm seeing interference patterns shifting. Whatever's out there, it's affecting our instruments. We're picking up energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. Just be careful." "Copy that," Elias said, tightening his grip on his pulse rifle. He continued through the ravine, his eyes scanning the rocky walls for any sign of a hidden threat. The terrain began to change, the walls of the ravine growing wider until they opened into a cavern. Green BioLite veins ran through the rocks, casting an eerie glow that lit up the space. In the center of the cavern was another Gyren device, larger than the one he'd found before. It was surrounded by those same green symbols he'd seen on the pod. Elias approached cautiously, crouching low. The device was clearly active, its lights flickering in a rhythmic pattern. As he circled it, he noticed something unusual, a row of transparent capsules lined along its side, each filled with the green substance. He felt a chill. The Gyren had been collecting the substance. But for what purpose? Before he could examine it further, his comm crackled to life, this time with static and distorted voices. He strained to listen as the interference cleared for just a second. "Repeat, Cade, leave. It's not what it seems." The voice was unfamiliar. It wasn't Riker. Elias glanced around, eyes narrowing. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Silence. Then, the same whispering voice spoke again, overlapping with the static. "Turn back, Cade. This is not your fight." Elias's hand instinctively went to his rifle. Whoever was on the other end had been tracking him for a while. "You don't get to decide that," he muttered. He approached the Gyron device, reaching out to the capsules. The liquid inside shimmered, casting long shadows on the cave walls. When he tapped the panel next to the capsules, it displayed a map, one that highlighted several points across the planet, all marked in red. His location was one of them. "Riker, I've got a map here showing several sites on the planet. Looks like they're all linked to this substance." "I'm seeing it. This is bigger than we thought. We need more intel." Elias's fingers hovered over the panel. He knew that tampering with Gyron tech was a risk, but he had to know what they were planning. He keyed in a sequence, and the screen shifted to a video feed. The footage showed the jungle, much like where he was now. But there was something else. Gyron soldiers, clad in exosuits, dragging human and alien prisoners towards containment pods. The Gyron weren't just hunting wildlife. They were capturing and experimenting. Elias's stomach clenched. This was no simple expedition. The Gyron were conducting tests on both wildlife and sentient beings. But why? As he continued watching, the video changed. One of the containment pods burst open, and the green substance spilled out. It writhed, shifting into a shape that pulsed with life, before latching onto one of the Gyron soldiers. The soldier screamed as the substance spread, consuming his suit and body, transforming him into a monstrous figure, half Gyron, half something else. "Riker, are you seeing this?" Elias whispered. "Affirmative. It's a biological weapon. They're testing it. But it's mutating, affecting more than just wildlife." Elias's mind raced. If the Gyron had lost control of this substance, it explained the creature's aggression and their warnings. But it also meant the situation was far worse than he'd thought. If this corruption spread unchecked, it could wipe out everything on the planet, wildlife, aliens, humans alike. "Elias, you need to pull out. We'll regroup and reassess." "Negative," Elias responded. "I'm close to finding answers. There's something more here, something the Gyron were hiding." He moved away from the device, keeping low as he navigated the cavern. His path led him deeper into the underground network. The green veins grew thicker, and the air felt charged with energy. The further he went, the more he felt like he was trespassing in an ancient place, a place that didn't welcome outsiders. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. It was unlike anything Elias had seen before. Pillars rose from the ground, inscribed with the same symbols as the ones on the Gyron pod, and in the center of the room was a structure, part machine, part organic. It pulsed with the same green light, casting eerie shadows. Elias's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he forced himself forward. He approached the structure, scanning for any clues. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to shift around him. He knew he was getting close to the truth, but the deeper he went, the more he felt like something was watching. Then, he heard the voice again. This time, it wasn't through his comms, it was echoing through the chamber itself, low and whispering. "Elias Cade, you seek answers, but you tread dangerous ground." He whipped around, pulse rifle raised. "Show yourself." The shadows shifted, and for a moment, he thought he saw a figure, tall, with eyes that glowed like the creatures he'd seen earlier. It vanished just as quickly, leaving him alone in the chamber. "Your kind should not interfere," the voice continued. "The corruption is spreading. It consumes all." Elias gritted his teeth, his pulse quickening. What is the corruption? What do the Gyron want with it? Silence hung heavy in the air before the voice whispered, "It is not theirs to control. It is ancient, older than the stars, and it will devour those who do not respect its power. Elias's eyes darted around the chamber. Whatever was happening here, it was beyond the Gyron, and it was clear he was only scratching the surface. As he took a step closer to the structure, he knew that if he wanted to survive and find the truth, he would have to go deeper into the darkness, where the real secrets were buried. Elias's heart pounded as he stood alone in the massive chamber, surrounded by the strange structure pulsing with that otherworldly green glow. The shadows continued to dance and shift, as if alive, and the voice echoed through the room, weaving its whispers into the air. Elias Cade, you walk a path not meant for your kind. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, scanning the room for any movement. The sense of being watched intensified, and the shadows seemed to converge, like the darkness itself was growing thicker. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "The guardian of this place, and the witness of its corruption," the voice responded, soft but laced with an ancient weight. Elias narrowed his eyes, straining to see through the shifting darkness. The figure he'd glimpsed earlier emerged again, its form barely visible. Its eyes glowed with a green hue, similar to the biolite veins in the walls. It was tall, humanoid but alien, with elongated limbs and a face that seemed both familiar and alien. "You speak of corruption," Elias said, taking a cautious step forward. "Is it tied to the Gyron's experiments?" "The Gyrons seek power beyond their understanding," the figure replied. "They awaken what should remain dormant." Elias's eyes darted to the green-lit structure at the center of the room. The device pulsed, casting long shadows across the cavern walls. "This corruption, it's tied to the green substance they're harvesting, isn't it?" The figure's eyes flared. "The substance is not of their making. It is the blood of this world, a power they attempt to harness for their own ends." Elias felt a chill. "And you're protecting it?" "Not protecting. Warning. This world is alive, Elias Cade. It remembers, and it does not forgive those who seek to exploit it." Elias clenched his jaw. The pieces were starting to fit together. The Gyron were not just hunting wildlife. They were extracting something ancient, something alive, and that something was fighting back. What happens if they don't stop? The figure's eyes darkened, and the shadows thickened around it. "This world will reclaim itself, and all who tread upon it will be consumed." Elias's mind raced. If the Gyron continued their experiments, the entire planet could become a death trap, not just for the Gyron, but for anyone caught in its wake. "How do I stop it?" The figure's form began to fade, its voice growing fainter. "Seek the heart of the corruption. But know this, once awakened, it cannot be put back to rest." Before Elias could ask more, the figure vanished, and the shadows receded. The chamber returned to its eerie silence, the only sound the low hum of the pulsing structure. Elias stared at the spot where the figure had stood, the weight of its warning settling over him. "Riker, you still with me?" he asked, tapping his comm. "Yeah, but I've lost visual. Whatever's down there, it's messing with our sensors. I think I found the source of the interference, and it's worse than we thought. The Gyron aren't just experimenting. They're trying to harness the planet's energy, and it's reacting." "Reacting how?" Elias hesitated. "The planet is alive, Riker. It's fighting back." There was a pause on the other end. "Alive? What do you mean?" "It's not just wildlife. The whole place, everything, it's like an organism, and the Gyron are waking it up." "Elias, that's—" Riker's voice trailed off, disbelief evident. "Look, whatever it is, you need to get out of there. We'll regroup topside and come up with a plan." Elias glanced back at the structure. "I need to find the source of this corruption first. If I don't, the Gyron will keep pushing until it's too late." "Elias, don't be an idiot. If what you're saying is true, we don't stand a chance." "Maybe, but if I can figure out what they're doing, we might have a shot." The calm was silent for a moment before Riker's resigned sigh came through. "Fine, just stay alive. We need you topside." Elias nodded, even though Riker couldn't see it. "I'll check in when I have something." He turned away from the structure and moved deeper into the cavern, following the path the shadows had taken. The air grew colder, and the biolite veins became more concentrated, pulsing faster as he descended. It felt as though the planet's heartbeat was speeding up, reacting to his presence. The tunnel opened into another cavern, this one even larger. Massive roots, twisted and ancient, crisscrossed the chamber. They glowed with the same green light, their tendrils reaching towards the center where a massive, pulsating core sat embedded in the ground. It was the source of the vein's light, its glow so intense that it cast everything in an emerald hue. Elias approached cautiously, his rifle raised. The core pulsed, and with each beat, the air vibrated. He felt it in his bones, a deep, thrumming energy that resonated through him. As he moved closer, his vision blurred. Images flashed before his eyes, scenes of an ancient civilization, tall and majestic beings walking among the trees, tending to the land. Then, the Gyran appeared, their ships descending, their machines tearing into the earth. The images shifted to chaos, wildlife mutating, trees transforming into monstrous forms, and the green veins spreading like wildfire. Elias staggered back, his head pounding. The core was showing him the past. No, it was showing him the planet's memories. He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to turn and run. The Gyran had awakened something ancient and powerful, and now it was his problem. He keyed his comm again. "Riker, I've found the source." "What is it?" It's like a heart, a core. The planet's energy is centered here." "Is it the source of the interference?" Elias nodded. "Yeah, and it's fighting back." He scanned the room, his eyes locking onto a series of Gyran devices embedded in the roots around the core. The machines were pulsing in tandem with the core, drawing energy from it. He moved closer, examining one of the devices. The symbols on it matched the ones he'd seen before, markings of extraction. "Riker, the Gyran are draining the planet's energy. They're pulling it from the core. Can you disable it?" Elias examined the device, tracing its circuits. "I can try, but I need to be careful. If I disrupt it too suddenly, it might trigger a reaction." He reached into his pack, pulling out a small EMP charge. "I'm going to set up an EMP. It should disrupt the connection without causing a backlash." "Elias, if this goes wrong..." "I know. But if we don't stop them now, it's only going to get worse." Elias attached the EMP to the device, setting the timer. As he worked, he noticed something else, a Gyran symbol etched into the roots beneath the device. It wasn't an extraction symbol, it was different, a warning. "What is this?" he muttered, tracing the symbol with his finger. Suddenly, the core pulsed, and the room filled with a blinding light. Elias shielded his eyes, but the energy surged through him, and he felt his body freeze. The visions returned, stronger this time. He saw the planet's surface cracking, green veins spreading, and wildlife transforming into monstrous abominations. He saw cities falling, Gyran and human alike. And then he saw himself, standing at the center of it all, a dark figure emerging from the core behind him. The light faded, and Elias stumbled back, his pulse racing. The planet wasn't just fighting the Gyran, it was lashing out at everything, and he was caught in the middle of it. The EMP beeped, and he snapped back to reality. "Riker, I'm activating the EMP. Stand by." "Roger that. Get clear." Elias pressed the button, and the charge detonated. The device sparked, and the energy flow to the core flickered. The pulsing light dimmed, and the air grew still. For a moment, it seemed like the energy had stopped. But then, the core surged, and the green veins flared brighter than ever. The roots lashed out, one of them striking Elias across the chest and sending him crashing into the wall. He felt the air leave his lungs as he collapsed, pain searing through his body. "Elias, what happened?" Riker's voice crackled through the comm. He struggled to catch his breath. "The EMP, it didn't work. The core, it's reacting." He tried to stand, but the roots wrapped around his legs, pulling him closer to the core. The energy pulsed, and he felt it burning through him, searing into his mind. The shadows in the room shifted again, and the figure reappeared, its eyes glowing fiercely. The heart awakens, Elias Cade. You cannot stop it now. Elias fought against the roots, but they tightened their grip. What do you want from me? The figure's expression remained unreadable. The Gyron's greed has doomed them, and all who follow in their wake. The corruption spreads. And now, you must choose, fight or flee. Elias's grip on his rifle tightened. I'm not running. The figure's eyes flashed. Then face the awakening and survive, if you can. The shadows enveloped the figure, and it vanished, leaving Elias alone as the roots pulled him closer to the core's pulsing light. The energy surged, and he felt it tearing at him, the green veins creeping up his arms, threatening to consume him. But he wasn't about to give up. With a roar, he reached into his pack, grabbing a plasma cutter. He slashed at the roots, cutting through them one by one until he broke free. Stumbling to his feet, he grabbed his rifle and aimed at the core. If the Gyron woke this thing up, then I'll make sure they regret it. He fired, the pulse rounds impacting the core's surface. The green light flickered, and the chamber shook. The energy surged again, but this time Elias was ready. He ran, dodging the lashing roots as he made his way back towards the tunnel. The ground quaked, and the walls began to collapse. As he sprinted through the tunnel, the green light faded, and the air grew colder. He knew he'd only bought himself a little time. Riker, I'm on my way out. The core's destabilizing. Copy that. We've got your location. Extraction in 5. Elias pushed forward, his mind racing. The Gyron had awakened something beyond their control, and now he had to find a way to stop it before it was too late. The shadows watched as he fled, their whispers echoing in the darkness. The awakening has begun. Elias's lungs burned as he sprinted through the collapsing tunnel. The walls shuddered, and debris rained down, forcing him to duck and weave to avoid being crushed. The glowing green veins pulsed violently, light his path in an unsettling, flickering light. He glanced at his HUD. His oxygen levels were holding, but the suit's power reserves were dropping rapidly. He needed to get out of the cave system and rendezvous with Riker before the entire place came down on him. Riker, I'm almost out. How's the extraction looking? He called through his comm, his voice echoing in the narrow passage. Elias, you've got 2 minutes before we lose our window, Riker's voice crackled back, the signal weakening as the interference from the core intensified. Sensors are going haywire. Whatever you did down there, the planet's reacting. Copy that. Elias's muscles screamed in protest as he pushed himself to run faster. The tunnel's exit was just ahead, the green glow giving way to the dim, natural light of the planet's surface. He burst out of the cave entrance, the cool, alien wind whipping against his suit as he emerged into the jungle. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and he could see the towering canopy of trees shaking as the planet's core unleashed its fury. The wildlife, usually hostile and territorial, was nowhere to be seen, a bad sign. He spotted Riker's dropship descending, its thrusters kicking up dust and debris as it hovered just above the tree line. Elias sprinted toward it, his boots pounding against the earth as he leaped onto the ship's ramp. Riker, already strapped into the pilot's seat, gave him a nod. Strap in, we're getting out of here. Elias threw himself into the co-pilot's seat and secured his harness. The dropship's engines roared as Riker pulled back on the controls, lifting them off the ground just as the Earth split open where they'd been standing moments earlier. The planet's surface heaved, green energy bursting from cracks and fissures, spreading like veins across the landscape. Elias looked out the viewport, watching as the jungle twisted and writhed. The trees and plants were being reshaped by the planet's energy, growing at an unnatural rate and taking on new, monstrous forms. It was as if the planet itself was awakening, reacting to the disturbance within its core. What the hell is happening? Riker muttered, his eyes scanning the sensors. The planet's fighting back, Elias said, wiping the sweat from his brow. The Gyron's extraction tech triggered some kind of chain reaction. It's like they woke up the planet's defenses. Riker shot him a look. Defenses? You're saying this place is alive? More than alive. It's sentient. And it's pissed. The dropship banked hard as Riker dodged a massive tree root that erupted from the ground, snaking up toward them. Elias gripped his seat, the G-forces pressing him back. Get us to a safe altitude. We need to regroup and figure out what to do next. Riker nodded, pulling up hard as the dropship gained altitude, the landscape below becoming a blur of green and glowing veins. They broke through the treetops and climbed higher, away from the chaos on the surface. But as they ascended, something else came into view, a fleet of Gyron ships hovering over a massive excavation site miles away. The ships were drilling deep into the earth, extracting the glowing green substance that was spreading across the planet. Elias's eyes narrowed. There they are. Riker followed his gaze. That's a full-scale operation. They've got half a fleet down there. Which means they're not stopping anytime soon, Elias muttered. They've gone all in. Riker sighed. What's the play? We can't take on a fleet by ourselves. Elias clenched his jaw, staring at the extraction site. We need to shut down their operation at the source. Whatever they're pulling out of the ground, it's what's triggering the corruption. If we can stop the flow, maybe we can buy the planet some time. Riker shook his head. You saw the size of their fleet. We don't have the firepower. Elias leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. He knew Riker was right. Even with the dropship's weapons, they were outgunned and outnumbered. But there had to be another way. We don't need to take out the fleet, we just need to get to their main control hub. If we can sabotage their systems, we can disrupt the entire operation. Riker raised an eyebrow. You want to infiltrate a Gyron command center? You're crazy. Maybe, Elias admitted. But we don't have another choice. If we don't stop them, the planet's going to turn into a war zone. Riker was silent for a moment, his hands gripping the controls. Finally, he nodded. All right. But we're going to need intel, and we're going to need it fast. Elias's fingers flew over the console, pulling up maps and data from their last recon missions. The Gyron fleet's position was heavily fortified, but there were weak points, narrow passages through the jungle that could get them close enough to the central hub without being detected. There, he said, pointing to a canyon hidden beneath the canopy. We can follow this route. It'll get us close enough for a low-altitude approach. Riker studied the map. That's tight, but it's doable. We'll need to stay under the radar and move fast. Let's go. The dropship banked, and they descended back toward the planet's surface. The jungle blurred past as they hugged the terrain, using the natural cover to mask their approach. The closer they got to the Gyron fleet, the more intense the interference became. Elias's HUD flickered, the sensors struggling to maintain a stable reading. As they neared the canyon, the ground trembled again, and Elias glanced out the viewport. The green veins were spreading faster now, their glow intensifying as the planet reacted to the Gyron's continued extraction. We don't have much time, he muttered. They skimmed through the canyon, the dropship's engines humming as they weaved between narrow rock formations. The walls of the canyon were lined with ancient carvings, symbols and figures that mirrored the ones Elias had seen in the visions. The planet's history was written in the stone, but there was no time to decipher it. They emerged from the canyon, and the Gyron fleet loomed ahead. The ships were massive, their hulls bristling with weaponry and machinery designed for extraction. The central hub, a fortress-like structure, was nestled in the heart of the fleet, surrounded by energy shields and defensive turrets. The dropship hovered just above the treetops, the whirring of its engines barely audible over the distant rumble of the Gyron fleet's machinery. Elias and Riker remained tense in the cockpit, scanning the terrain below. The fortress-like command hub lay in the center of a heavily defended zone, shielded by energy fields and protected by turret arrays. The Gyron weren't taking any chances. Whatever they were extracting, it was vital to their plans. Elias stared at the console, His eyes locked on the glowing green patterns spreading across the landscape. The planet's core was reacting violently, its veins of energy glowing brighter as the Gyron intensified their operations. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. If they didn't find a way to disrupt the extraction soon, the entire planet might be consumed by the corruption. Riker adjusted the dropship's altitude, keeping it low to evade detection. "We need a plan, and we need it fast. There's no way we can take out those defenses head-on." Elias's gaze remained fixed on the console. "Agreed. We need to get inside their command hub and disable the core systems. But first, we need to find an entry point." Riker's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up a topographical map of the area. "There, see that maintenance hatch on the north side? It's connected to an underground tunnel network. We might be able to use it to get in undetected." Elias nodded, studying the layout. The tunnel network was extensive, weaving through the earth beneath the fleet's landing zone. "It's a risk, but it's our best shot. We'll have to move fast." Riker brought the dropship down into a clearing hidden by thick vegetation, and they disembarked, moving swiftly through the undergrowth. The planet's energy veins pulsed beneath their feet, light the ground in a soft, eerie glow. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. As they approached the maintenance hatch, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He paused, scanning the jungle around them. The trees stood tall and silent, but he knew better than to trust appearances. The planet had eyes everywhere. "Something wrong?" Riker asked, his hand hovering over his sidearm. Elias shook his head. "Just a feeling. Stay sharp." They reached the hatch and pried it open, descending into the dark tunnel below. The air was thick and humid, the walls lined with glowing green veins that twisted like vines. Elias's suit sensors flickered, struggling to maintain a stable reading. The interference was getting stronger. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Machinery hummed and glowed with the same green energy they had seen on the surface. Gyron drones moved along the pathways, their metallic eyes scanning for any intruders. The scale of the operation was staggering. This was no simple extraction mission. They were tapping into the planet's very essence. Riker crouched next to him, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to find the control center. That's where we'll have the best shot at disrupting the core systems." Elias nodded, his eyes scanning the chamber for an access point. "Follow me." They moved swiftly through the maze of machinery, keeping low and avoiding the drones' patrols. The deeper they went, the more intense the energy became. Elias could feel the heat radiating from the veins in the walls, and the air felt charged with an almost electric tension. As they neared the core of the chamber, Elias spotted a series of terminals connected to a central console. Gyron engineers moved between the terminals, their faces obscured by helmets and breathing apparatuses. Elias and Riker ducked behind a row of machinery, watching as the Gyron worked. "There's our target," Elias whispered. "We need to take out the engineers and access that console." Riker checked his gear, nodding. "Ready when you are." Elias signaled, and they moved in tandem, their weapons raised. The Gyron engineers didn't see them coming. Elias fired 2 precise shots, taking down the nearest pair. Riker followed up, neutralizing another. The engineers fell silently, and the 2 soldiers moved to the console. Elias quickly plugged into the terminal, his fingers working fast as he bypassed the Gyron's security systems. Lines of alien code flashed across the screen, and he searched for the controls to the core systems. He found the access point, an energy flow regulator that controlled the extraction rate. He hesitated for a moment. "If I shut this down, it could cause a chain reaction. We're dealing with forces we don't fully understand." Riker glanced over his shoulder, his expression tense. "We don't have time for caution. Whatever they're doing is killing the planet. We've got to act." Elias nodded and initiated the shutdown sequence. The console flashed red as alarms blared, and the chamber's lights flickered. The energy veins running through the walls pulsed violently, and the ground shook beneath their feet. "Brace yourself," Elias muttered as he finished the sequence. The room erupted with energy, the green veins lighting up in a blinding flash. The machinery around them shuddered, and the drone's eyes flared before they shut down, falling lifeless to the ground. The entire chamber quaked as the energy veins pulled back, retreating into the earth. Elias grabbed Riker's arm. "We've got to move. Now." They sprinted back through the tunnel, the ground shaking beneath their boots. The planet's fury had been unleashed, and the energy that had once pulsed steadily through the veins now surged erratically, bursting through the tunnel walls and spraying molten green light. Elias could feel the heat growing, and his suit's alarms blared as the energy levels spiked. "The core's destabilizing. We need to get topside." They burst out of the maintenance hatch, only to find the jungle transformed. The trees twisted and contorted, growing at unnatural speeds as the planet's energy reshaped the landscape. The Gyran fleet above was in chaos. Ships fired at the ground, trying to contain the eruptions, but the planet's power was too strong. Elias and Riker ran through the chaos, dodging falling debris and erupting roots. The jungle came alive, as if it were fighting back against its invaders. Elias felt the ground shift beneath him, and he stumbled, catching himself on a tree that seemed to writhe under his touch. "Elias!" Riker shouted, pulling him up. "The dropship's ahead." They reached the clearing, where the dropship waited, its engines already fired up. Elias leaped onto the ramp, pulling Riker with him as they lifted off. The ground below continued to fracture and heave, the green energy erupting in massive bursts. As they climbed higher, Elias looked back at the Gyran fleet. The ships were scrambling, their formations breaking apart as they tried to escape the planet's wrath. In the distance, he saw the command hub, once protected by energy shields, now engulfed in green flames as the planet reclaimed its power. "Did we do it?" Riker asked, his eyes fixed on the chaos below. Elias's hand tightened around his harness. "We bought some time, but this isn't over. The planet's still reacting, and the Gyran will be back. We need to find the source of this energy and figure out how to stop it for good." Riker nodded. "And what about the ancient civilization? The symbols you've been seeing, there's got to be a connection." Elias stared at the glowing veins spreading across the horizon. "I think we're only scratching the surface. There's more to this planet than we know." As the dropship ascended through the clouds, Elias felt a chill. The planet's energy, the ancient civilization's downfall, and the Gyran's relentless extraction were all connected. The truth lay buried deep within the planet's core, a truth he had to uncover before it was too late. But the closer they got, the more he felt that something or someone was watching. The dropship cut through the sky, leaving the chaos of the jungle behind. Elias and Riker sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts as the planet's surface shifted and rumbled below. They had disrupted the Gyran's operation, but the cost was becoming clearer. The planet was fighting back, and it was only a matter of time before things escalated further. Elias glanced at the display screen, watching the live feed of the terrain. The veins of energy were branching out faster, their glow intensifying. It wasn't just the energy extraction anymore. Whatever was happening beneath the surface was spreading, and it was only getting worse. Riker broke the silence. "We've pissed it off, that's for sure. But what's next? We can't keep poking at it without knowing what we're dealing with." Elias's grip tightened on the console. "We need answers, and fast. The symbols and visions I've been seeing, they're a clue, but I don't know how they fit together. We've got to find the source." Riker frowned, leaning back in his seat. "The source? You think it's like a central point? A core?" Elias nodded. "If we find the core of this energy, whatever's powering this whole network, we might be able to figure out what's going on and how to shut it down. We can't just react to the symptoms anymore. We need to go for the heart of the problem." Riker rubbed his chin, contemplating. "So, where do we start?" The dropship scanner beeped, and Elias brought up a map of the planet's surface. The green veins glowed across the screen, pulsing like a heartbeat. In the middle of the map, a larger concentration of energy formed a distinct focal point. It was surrounded by mountains and deep valleys, a natural fortress. There, Elias pointed. That's where the energy converges. If there's a core, it's got to be there. Riker raised an eyebrow. We're flying into the hornet's nest. Exactly. But if we don't find out what's going on, it won't matter. This whole place will be torn apart. They set the dropship's course for the convergence point. As they flew, Elias felt the familiar tingling sensation crawling up his spine, the same one he'd experienced when he first set foot on the planet. It was as if the energy was calling out to him, pulling him closer. The terrain shifted below, becoming more rugged as they approached the focal point. Jagged cliffs jutted out, and deep chasms glowed with the same eerie green light. The dropship's sensors lit up, warning of seismic activity as the ground shifted and cracked. Riker maneuvered the ship through the rocky landscape, weaving between towering spires and glowing ravines. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Feels like the planet's alive." Elias stared out the window, his eyes scanning the terrain. "It is, and it's not happy." The dropship landed on a plateau near the entrance to a massive cave. The energy veins ran directly into it, disappearing into the darkness below. Elias and Riker armed themselves, checking their gear one last time before stepping out into the cool, charged air. The ground vibrated beneath their boots, and the air was thick with tension. The cave loomed ahead, its entrance lined with ancient symbols similar to the ones Elias had seen before. He paused, his eyes tracing the markings. "Same symbols," Elias muttered. "This place is connected to the civilization that was here before." Riker scanned the entrance. "Let's hope they left us some clues." They moved forward cautiously, the beams of their flashlights piercing the darkness. The cave walls glowed faintly, the energy veins creating an otherworldly atmosphere. As they ventured deeper, the temperature dropped, and the air grew heavy with the scent of earth and something metallic. Elias felt the pull grow stronger, almost like an invisible hand guiding him forward. His vision blurred momentarily, and he stumbled, catching himself against the wall. For a brief moment, his surroundings shifted. He was no longer in the cave, but standing in a vast open space filled with towering structures and glowing symbols. He blinked, and the vision faded. Riker looked back, concerned. "You all right?" Elias nodded, steadying himself. "Yeah, just a flash. It's like I'm seeing echoes of something that happened here." They pressed on, and the cave opened into a massive chamber. In the center stood a colossal structure, an ancient obelisk covered in symbols and surrounded by a swirling vortex of energy. The veins of light converged at its base, feeding into the swirling mass. Elias's heart pounded as he approached the obelisk. This is it, the core. Riker eyed the structure warily. Whatever it is, it's putting out a hell of a lot of energy. Elias reached out, his fingers hovering over the symbols. As he touched the surface, a wave of images flooded his mind, scenes of the ancient civilization harnessing the energy, using it to build cities, and then losing control. The planet's power had once been their ally, but something had changed, turning it into a force of destruction. He pulled back, his breathing ragged. They tried to control it, but it turned on them. Riker's eyes narrowed. And now the Zyran are making the same mistake. Elias nodded, piecing the puzzle together. This energy isn't just power, it's alive. It's a force of nature, maybe even consciousness, and the more they extract, the more unstable it gets. Before they could act, a warning blared through the dropship's comms. Zyran reinforcements were closing in. The ground trembled, and the chamber's walls began to crack as the energy pulsed violently. The Zyran had detected their presence. Elias gritted his teeth. "We don't have much time. We need to shut this down." He scanned the obelisk's base, looking for a control panel or interface. His fingers moved rapidly, deciphering the symbols. The ancient language seemed to come alive in his mind, guiding his actions. Riker stood guard, his weapon raised as the sound of approaching drones echoed through the cave. "Hurry up, Elias," Riker urged, his eyes darting to the entrance. Elias finally found what he was looking for, a central node at the base of the obelisk. He accessed it, inputting the symbols he had seen in his visions. The obelisk shuddered, and the energy swirling around it began to stabilize, its light shifting from green to blue. "Almost there," Elias said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just a few more steps." The drones burst into the chamber, their eyes glowing red as they locked onto the two soldiers. Riker opened fire, his shots precise as he took down the first wave. Elias continued working, his hands moving frantically as he manipulated the symbols. The obelisk pulsed, and the energy veins outside the cave began to dim. Elias's fingers flew across the console as the chamber's tremors intensified. The Gyran had come in force, determined to stop them. As the energy stabilized, a deeper understanding formed in Elias's mind, a connection that went beyond his mission or even the ancient civilization. It was as if the planet was trying to communicate, and he was its chosen messenger. The mystery was deepening, and Elias knew that this was just the beginning. The chamber shuddered as the energy pulsed through the veins like a heartbeat, and Elias felt the surge beneath his skin. Riker's weapon fired repeatedly, taking down drones one after another as they flooded into the chamber. Elias's hands continued moving over the symbols. The ancient script glowed as he input the final sequence. The obelisk responded, its light shifting from a chaotic green to a deep, calming blue. The energy that had roiled and surged now stabilized, forming a steady, controlled stream. Elias could feel the shift, the planet's rage subsiding, but only for a moment. As the obelisk's light dimmed, Elias felt a pull, like a whisper in the back of his mind. The same sensation he had experienced in the jungle, only stronger. It was as if the planet was calling to him directly. For a split second, he felt himself falling, his consciousness pulled into a void. The chamber around him faded, and Elias found himself standing in the middle of a vast, ancient city. The structures were enormous, towering above him, their surfaces covered in the same glowing symbols. He was alone, the air filled with a hum that resonated through his bones. Elias looked around, seeing the city as it had once been, alive, filled with movement and activity. But then, the scene shifted. The structures crumbled, and a violent tremor shook the ground. He saw shadows, forms that moved through the ruins, creatures he couldn't quite make out. And then, the energy veins surged, tearing the city apart as if in retaliation. He gasped, and the vision faded. Elias was back in the chamber, his hand pressed against the obelisk. Riker was pulling him away, his eyes wide with concern. "Elias, snap out of it." Elias blinked, the vision still fresh in his mind. "I saw it, the civilization that lived here before. They tried to control the energy, but it destroyed them." Riker's eyes darted to the entrance, where more drones appeared. "Whatever you saw, we've got bigger problems. Reinforcements are coming, and we need to get out of here, now." Elias tore his hand away from the obelisk, his mind racing. The energy wasn't just power, it was life, a force that had once been part of the civilization's existence. But it had been corrupted or turned against them. And now, it was reacting violently to the Gyran's extraction efforts. The two soldiers moved swiftly, making their way back to the dropship as the chamber trembled around them. The Gyran drones pursued, but Elias and Riker took cover, returning fire with precision. They fought their way through the onslaught, and as they reached the dropship's ramp, Elias glanced back at the obelisk. He felt the pull again, a whispering voice that echoed in his mind. It was pleading, a desperate cry for help. "We need to get to the command center," Elias said, determination in his voice as they boarded the dropship. "The Gyran are going after the energy network's core, and if they reach it before us, this whole planet could go down." Riker nodded, powering up the dropship's engines. "Then we'd better move fast." The dropship lifted off, and Elias kept his eyes on the ground below as they ascended. The veins of energy stretched out like a web, pulsing in erratic patterns. The Gyran's actions were destabilizing the network further, and the planet's response was becoming more violent. He saw tremors splitting the ground, massive cracks forming as entire sections of the jungle were swallowed up. As they flew towards the convergence point, Elias accessed the dropship's communications array. He hacked into the Gyron's encrypted channels, hoping to gain some insight into their plans. His fingers moved swiftly over the controls, and soon a Gyron transmission crackled through the speakers. "Command, this is Unit 27. We've lost contact with the forward extraction teams. Unstable readings from the core site. Requesting additional forces for containment." Elias listened closely. The Gyron were feeling the pressure too. They didn't understand the planet's energy any more than he did, but they were doubling down, desperate to secure it. He turned to Riker. "They're reinforcing their position. We need to intercept them before they reach the core." Riker adjusted their course, and the dropship accelerated. The terrain below grew more rugged, the energy veins glowing brighter as they approached the focal point. The mountains rose like jagged teeth, and in the distance, Elias saw the entrance to a massive underground complex, an ancient facility built into the mountainside. The Gyron had set up a perimeter, and Elias could see the glow of their shields and the movement of their forces as they prepared to breach the facility's entrance. The dropship's sensors detected a spike in energy levels. Whatever was inside that complex was the source of the planet's power. Elias and Riker touched down on a ridge overlooking the Gyron position. They disembarked, taking cover as they observed the enemy's movements. Gyron soldiers moved in formation, their heavy weaponry aimed at the facility's entrance. Engineers worked furiously, setting up charges to blast through the ancient doors. "We can't let them get in there," Elias whispered. "If they reach the core, they could trigger a chain reaction." Riker checked his ammo, his eyes scanning the terrain. "We'll have to go in hard and fast. Hit them before they know what's happening." Elias nodded. "We'll disable their charges first, then draw their attention. If we can buy enough time, maybe the planet will do the rest." They moved swiftly, navigating the rocky terrain. As they approached the Gyron position, Elias took out the engineers first, firing precise shots that dropped them before they could react. Riker covered him, suppressing the soldiers as they returned fire. Elias reached the charges, disabling them with a quick hack. The Gyron's progress was halted, but the soldiers regrouped, advancing on their position. Riker tossed a grenade, the explosion scattering the Gyron forces and buying them precious seconds. As the smoke cleared, Elias saw the ground beneath the Gyron begin to shift. The energy veins pulsed, and the terrain cracked open, forming a chasm that swallowed several soldiers. The planet was responding to their presence, and it was not holding back. Elias and Riker pushed forward, using the chaos to their advantage. They reached the entrance to the facility, where the massive doors stood partially open. Elias felt the familiar pull, stronger than ever, as he approached. "Whatever's in here, it's calling to me," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it wants us to stop them." Riker shot a glance at Elias, concern in his eyes. "Or it's leading us into a trap. Either way, we're in too deep to turn back now." They entered the facility, the air thick with energy. The walls were covered in glowing symbols, and Elias felt a sense of familiarity as they moved deeper into the complex. It was as if he had been here before, or perhaps something inside him remembered. Elias and Riker stood at the threshold of the massive chamber, the swirling vortex of energy pulsating at its center like a heart in the midst of a storm. The air crackled with power, and Elias felt a magnetic pull toward the vortex, urging him to step forward. It was as if the very essence of the planet was reaching out to him, whispering secrets he could barely grasp. "Elias, are you sure about this?" Riker's voice broke through the haze of energy. His expression was a mix of concern and determination. "We don't know what's going to happen in there." "I can feel it, Riker." "This is where we're meant to be," Elias replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The planet is alive, and it's trying to tell us something." Without waiting for a response, Elias stepped into the chamber. The energy enveloped him, swirling around him like a living entity. Visions flashed through his mind, images of the ancient civilization, their rise and fall, their connection to the energy network. He saw them harnessing the power, using it to thrive, only to be consumed by their ambition. Elias gasped as the visions intensified, drowning him in memories that were not his own. He saw the Gyran arriving, their ships darkening the skies, their intentions clear. They came for the energy, to strip the planet of its life force. "Elias," Riker shouted, pulling him back. "We need to get out of here." But the energy had a grip on Elias, anchoring him in place. "No, I have to understand," he cried out, breaking free of Riker's grasp. He felt himself pulled deeper into the vortex, the energy intertwining with his very essence. In the heart of the energy, Elias glimpsed a vision of a vast network, an intricate web of light that spanned the planet, connecting every living thing. It was beautiful and terrifying, a symphony of existence that resonated with life. He understood now that the energy was not just a resource, it was the soul of the planet itself. The Gyran had come to take that soul, to drain the life from the world in their pursuit of power. And now, with the facility's entrance breached and the core vulnerable, they were on the verge of unleashing something catastrophic. Suddenly, a violent shockwave reverberated through the chamber. The Gyran had initiated their breach, and the ground beneath Elias's feet trembled. The energy vortex surged, and he felt the planet's anger rise, a deep, primal rage that echoed through the air. "Elias, we have to go," Riker's voice pierced through the chaos. "Now." Reluctantly, Elias tore himself away from the vortex, the visions fading as he returned to reality. He staggered back, gasping for air, the weight of what he had experienced pressing heavily on his chest. Riker was already moving, his weapon drawn and ready. "They're coming. We need to regroup and stop them from getting to the core." Elias nodded, determination flooding his veins. "We can't let them reach it. If they tap into that energy, it could destroy everything." They raced through the facility, moving with urgency as alarms blared and the air crackled with tension. The Gyran soldiers had breached the outer defenses, pouring into the complex like a dark tide. As they navigated the corridors, Elias felt the planet's energy shifting, responding to the chaos around them. They reached a large control room, the walls lined with consoles that flickered with data. Riker began accessing the systems, his fingers flying over the controls as he attempted to gather intel on the Gyran's progress. "Elias, look at this," Riker said, pointing at the screen. "The core is located deeper in the facility, but it's heavily guarded. They're already mobilizing their forces." Elias felt a surge of urgency. "We need to find a way to divert their attention. If we can draw them away from the core, we might be able to sabotage their efforts." Riker nodded, pulling up a schematic of the facility. "There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the core. We can use that to slip in and disrupt their operations." Elias glanced at the map, his mind racing with possibilities. "If we create a distraction at the entrance, we can lure their forces away. We need to make it look like we're attacking from the outside." Riker smirked, his confidence shining through. "I like the way you think. Let's give them a show they won't forget." They moved quickly, positioning themselves near the entrance to the facility. Riker set up explosives, their beeping countdown echoing through the air. Elias surveyed the area, his heart pounding with anticipation. "Ready?" Riker asked, glancing at Elias. "Let's do this," Elias replied, determination lighting a fire within him. As the countdown reached 0, a massive explosion rocked the facility, debris flying through the air as the entrance collapsed. The Gyran soldiers inside scrambled, their attention drawn to the chaos outside. "Now," Elias shouted, rushing into the maintenance tunnel with Riker at his side. They navigated the narrow passage, adrenaline surging through their veins. The tunnel led them deeper into the facility, the air growing warmer as they approached the core. Elias could feel the energy pulsing in waves, vibrating through the walls. It was almost as if the planet itself was aware of their presence, guiding them toward the heart of the network. As they emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves in a massive chamber filled with humming machinery. The core was at its center, a swirling mass of energy surrounded by Gyran soldiers, their weapons ready. Elias's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight. "This is it," he whispered, the gravity of the situation settling in. Riker nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We have to be quick. Let's take them out before they realize what's happening." They moved silently, flanking the Gyran soldiers. Elias felt the energy of the chamber amplifying his resolve. They engaged, the air filled with the sounds of gunfire and the crackling of energy. Elias fought with precision, his focus honed on the Gyran's movements. Each shot was calculated, taking down their enemies with purpose. Riker's support was unwavering, his tactics seamless as they worked together to take control of the room. In the midst of the chaos, Elias caught sight of the core. It was mesmerizing, an orb of light pulsating with power, tendrils of energy reaching out like fingers. The Gyran were attempting to siphon that power, but Elias could feel the planet's resistance, a force pushing back against their intrusion. "We need to shut this down," Elias shouted, pointing at the control panel next to the core. Riker nodded, moving to secure their position as Elias raced to the controls. He quickly assessed the interface, his heart pounding as he realized the complexity of the systems. The Gyran had integrated their technology with the ancient mechanisms, creating a dangerous hybrid that could easily overload. "Elias, watch out!" Riker yelled as a Gyran soldier charged at him. Elias glanced back, seeing the soldier aiming their weapon. Without thinking, he turned and fired, the shot hitting its mark and taking down the threat. With the immediate danger averted, Elias focused on the control panel. He could see the energy levels rising dangerously, the core on the verge of collapse. "I need to override their systems." He worked quickly, tapping into the ancient technology as the Gyran soldiers regrouped, aware of the threat he posed. The atmosphere crackled with tension, each second stretching into an eternity. "Elias, we're outnumbered," Riker shouted, his gun firing to keep the Gyran at bay. "I'm almost there," Elias replied, his focus unwavering. He felt the energy from the core coursing through him, a connection that fueled his determination. "Come on, come on." Finally, he found the override function, his fingers flying over the controls. The core responded, its light flashing as Elias initiated the shutdown sequence. The energy swelled, an explosion of light and sound erupting from the core. "Get back," Riker shouted, pulling Elias away just as the core overloaded. A shock wave radiated through the chamber, sending the Gyran soldiers reeling. Elias barely had time to register the chaos as the core erupted in a brilliant display of energy, tendrils of light bursting forth and enveloping the chamber. It was as if the planet itself was retaliating, pushing back against the invaders with a ferocity that took his breath away. Elias and Riker stumbled back, the energy crackling around them. "We need to get out of here," Riker shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Elias nodded, the urgency of the situation dawning on him. They turned to flee, navigating through the collapsing chamber as the energy surged around them. The Gyran were in disarray, their plans unraveling as the core's explosion wreaked havoc on their systems. As they raced through the corridors, the facility trembled, walls cracking and alarms blaring. The planet was fighting back, and Elias could feel its determination coursing through him. "Elias, this way," Riker yelled, pointing toward a side exit. They pushed through, the energy of the chamber collapsing behind them in a deafening roar. Outside, the world had transformed. The landscape was ablaze with energy, the sky light by the explosion. The Gyran ships were scrambling, their formation breaking as they struggled to comprehend the chaos unfolding on the ground. Elias felt the ground shake beneath him, the planet's anger palpable. "We need to regroup with the others," he shouted, scanning the horizon for signs of their team. Riker nodded, his expression resolute. "Let's move." They raced toward their base, the energy of the planet thrumming beneath their feet. Elias could feel the connection deepening, a bond that transcended understanding. He realized that the energy was not just a resource, it was life itself, and they had to protect it. As they reached the base, Elias caught sight of their team, huddled together, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the sky for threats. "Elias, Riker, you made it," one of the team members called, relief washing over their faces. "We shut down the core. But the Gyren won't stop coming, Riker said, his voice steady. We need to prepare for their next move. Elias stepped forward, adrenaline still coursing through him. We need to rally everyone. This is about more than just us. It's about the planet. We can't let them take its energy. The team nodded, their resolve strengthening. They began strategizing, plotting their next steps as the Gyren regrouped in the distance, their ships hovering ominously above. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the landscape, Elias felt the weight of their mission settle on his shoulders. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the very soul of the planet, and he knew they would do whatever it took to protect it. Elias stood at the base of the great stone archway, its once mighty structure now marred by the scars of battle. The remnants of the ancient civilization lay scattered around him, fragments of art, shattered tools, and the echoes of a time long past. Above him, the sky darkened with Gyren ships, their silhouettes stark against the horizon. They were regrouping, preparing for a renewed assault. Elias, Riker's voice broke through the stillness. Elias turned to see him hurrying towards him, breathless and urgent. We've got reports of Gyren forces moving closer to our position. They're deploying scouts in the area. Elias's heart raced as he surveyed the landscape. We need to fortify our defenses. If they reach the base, they'll take the energy for themselves. Agreed. But we can't just sit and wait for them to come to us, Riker replied, his eyes narrowing in thought. We need to take the fight to them, draw their attention away from the base. Elias felt a surge of determination. What if we use the remnants of the civilization? The ruins could serve as a cover, and we might be able to set traps. Good thinking, Riker said, a spark of enthusiasm igniting in his eyes. Let's gather the team and come up with a plan. They rushed back to their base, where the remaining members of their team were gathered, tense and ready for action. Elias stepped forward, taking charge. We have Gyren scouts approaching. We can't afford to let them reach the energy core. Are we going to wait for them to attack? One of the team members asked, glancing nervously at the horizon. No, Elias said, shaking his head. We're going to take the fight to them. We'll use the ruins of the ancient civilization as a staging ground. Set traps, create distractions, and lure them into our territory. It's time to turn the tables. The team nodded, a sense of purpose washing over them. They quickly began strategizing, drawing maps and discussing tactics. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, each member eager to play their part in the impending battle. As they worked, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The Gyren were relentless, and every moment spent planning was a moment wasted. He could feel the energy of the planet thrumming beneath him, urging him to act. Let's move, Riker called, rallying the team. We don't have time to waste. They set off toward the ruins, the ancient stones rising like silent sentinels against the fading light. The air was thick with tension as they approached, every crack and rustle heightening their senses. Elias took the lead, guiding the team through the labyrinth of debris and crumbling structures. The remnants of the civilization held secrets, whispers of a time when the planet thrived. As they navigated the ruins, he felt a strange connection, a sense of belonging to this place that had been forgotten. Here, Elias said, stopping before a large stone column. We can use this as a vantage point. They quickly set to work, using the ruins to create makeshift barricades and traps. Riker directed the placement of explosives while others set up snares and concealed firing positions. Elias moved with purpose, his instincts sharpened by the energy that flowed through him. As dusk fell, the team settled into position, hearts pounding in anticipation. They waited in silence, the only sounds being the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of Gyren ships. Remember, we're looking to draw them into our traps. Stay focused, and don't fire until you're sure, Riker whispered, his eyes scanning the darkening landscape. Elias nodded, feeling the energy pulsing around him. It was almost as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment to strike. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself and tuning into the vibrations of the ground. The energy felt alive, aware, and it guided him, whispering secrets that resonated deep within his soul. A distant rumble drew his attention, and he opened his eyes just as the first Gyran scouts appeared on the horizon. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, scanning the area for any signs of danger. "Here they come," Elias breathed, adrenaline coursing through him. As the Gyran approached, Elias signaled to the team, "Get ready." The scouts moved closer, their numbers increasing. Elias could see the gleam of their weapons, the way they moved with a predatory grace. He tightened his grip on his weapon, ready to defend their ground. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shattered the stillness. The team had set off the first trap, sending a shockwave through the air as debris rained down around them. The Gyran soldiers stumbled, momentarily disoriented. "Now," Riker shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Elias sprang into action, his training kicking in as he unleashed a barrage of fire at the Gyran. The team followed suit, their weapons roaring to life as they fought to gain the upper hand. The Gyran quickly regained their composure, returning fire with precision. Bullets whizzed past Elias, the sound sharp and jarring. He ducked behind cover, his heart racing as he exchanged fire with the enemy. "Push forward," Riker yelled, his voice commanding. "We need to keep them off balance." Elias nodded, moving with purpose as he flanked the Gyran. He felt the energy of the planet surging through him, fueling his resolve. He could sense their fear, their confusion as they tried to adapt to the ambush. But the Gyran were formidable foes, and they began regrouping. They moved with practiced efficiency, creating a defensive line and returning fire in a coordinated effort. Elias ducked behind a stone pillar, taking a moment to catch his breath. He could see the chaos unfolding before him, his teammates fighting valiantly. But the Gyran were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. "We need to fall back," one of the team members shouted, their voice strained. "They're too strong." "No," Elias replied, determination surging within him. "We can't retreat. We need to keep pushing them back. The core depends on us." Gathering his strength, Elias focused on the energy around him. He could feel the pulse of the planet, its anger and its sorrow. It was a living force, and he was connected to it. With every heartbeat, he drew strength from the ground beneath him, feeling it course through his veins. "Follow my lead," he shouted, rushing forward with renewed resolve. "We'll break their lines." Elias charged into the fray, weaving through the chaos as he closed in on the nearest group of Gyran soldiers. He could hear Riker and the others following closely behind, their spirits lifted by Elias's determination. With a fierce cry, Elias unleashed his energy, summoning the power of the planet in a burst of light. The ground trembled beneath him, and the Gyran soldiers faltered as the energy surged forward, creating a shockwave that sent them sprawling. The moment of hesitation allowed Elias and his team to press the advantage. They advanced with renewed vigor, pushing the Gyran back, forcing them into a defensive position. "Keep moving, don't let up," Riker shouted, his voice ringing with authority. Elias fought alongside his teammates, their resolve unwavering. The energy of the planet coursed through him, amplifying his every action. He felt alive, connected to the very essence of the world around him. As they pushed deeper into the enemy ranks, Elias spotted the Gyran commander, a tall figure with a commanding presence, directing the fight from the rear. A surge of determination coursed through him as he locked eyes with the commander. "That's their leader," Elias shouted, pointing toward the figure. "We take them out, and we disrupt their entire operation." The team rallied around him, determination etched on their faces. Together, they advanced, closing the distance between them and the Gyran leader. The fight raged on, each moment a blur of action and adrenaline. But Elias knew they were making progress. The Gyran lines were breaking, and their forces were scattering under the relentless assault. With a final surge of energy, Elias and his team reached the Gyran commander. The enemy leader turned, eyes widening in surprise as Elias launched himself forward, striking with precision and power. The impact sent the Gyran commander crashing to the ground. and the remaining soldiers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "Stand down," Riker called, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. "Your leader is defeated. Surrender now, and we'll show mercy." For a moment, the Gyran soldiers remained still, their weapons raised. Then, slowly, one by one, they began lowering their arms. The fight drained out of them as the realization of their defeat settled in. Elias stood tall, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The energy still pulsed beneath him, and he knew the struggle to protect it was only beginning. "Good work, everyone," he said, his voice steady. "But this is just the start. We have to figure out what the Gyran are really after, and why the planet's energy is so important." As the team regrouped, Elias felt the weight of their mission settle on his shoulders. The mystery of the energy and its connection to the planet was still unsolved, and the truth lay somewhere beyond the veil. "We'll uncover the truth," he whispered, gazing out at the horizon. "And we'll protect this planet, no matter the cost." Elias felt the stillness of the battlefield settle over him. The Gyran had withdrawn for now, their forces scattered and their leaders subdued. The ruins of the ancient civilization lay in eerie silence, the echoes of their clash still lingering in the air. He crouched down beside Riker, who was studying the readings on a handheld device. "Anything new?" Elias asked, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. Riker shook his head. "They've fallen back, regrouping somewhere beyond the mountain range. We've got a short window before they come back stronger." Elias's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the horizon. "They won't give up easily. Whatever they're after, it's worth a lot to them." Riker nodded. "Which means we need to move quickly. We have to find a way to protect the core before they come back with reinforcements." The team regrouped around them, each member weary but determined. Their expressions were a mix of resolve and uncertainty. They had fought hard to defend the ruins, but they knew it was only a temporary victory. Elias stood, his voice steady and commanding. "We need to head deeper into the ruins. The energy core's pulse is getting stronger, and I think it's trying to tell us something. There might be more clues about what happened here and how we can use the energy to defend ourselves." Riker raised an eyebrow. "You're sure about that?" Elias nodded. "I can feel it. The energy isn't just random. It's communicating. We've been fighting for survival, but maybe it's time we start listening." The team exchanged glances, some skeptical, others curious. Riker gave a short nod. "All right, lead the way. But stay alert. We're in Gyran territory, and they could be watching." They moved cautiously through the ruins, their steps muffled by the thick, ancient vegetation that had reclaimed the stone pathways. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Elias's senses heightened as they delved deeper into the city's remains. The structures grew more elaborate the farther they went. Massive stone pillars adorned with intricate carvings and symbols that glowed faintly as they passed. Elias felt drawn to these symbols, their meanings just out of reach, like whispers at the edge of his consciousness. "Look at this," Elias said, stopping before a large stone tablet embedded in the ground. It was covered in carvings, the symbols arranged in concentric circles that spiraled toward a central point. Riker crouched down, tracing a finger over the symbols. "It's similar to the energy network patterns we've seen, but more complex, like a map, or maybe a control mechanism." Elias felt a surge of recognition as he touched the symbols. The energy pulsed through him, and for a brief moment he saw flashes of another time, a vision of the ancient civilization, its people working together to harness the power of the planet. He could feel their hope, their determination, and the sense of impending danger they faced. "What is it, Elias?" Riker's voice brought him back to the present. Elias shook his head, the vision fading. "I don't know exactly, but it's like a memory. The people who built this place, they were trying to protect the energy, just like we are, and they left something here, a way to access it." Riker frowned. "A way to access the energy? You mean like a weapon?" Elias shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it's something more, something we haven't considered." He studied the tablet, his fingers tracing the grooves of the symbols. As he did, he felt the energy respond, guiding him. Slowly, he pressed his hand against the central point, and the symbols lit up, casting a pale blue light across the ruins. The ground beneath them shuddered, and the team drew their weapons, eyes darting to the surrounding shadows. "Stay sharp," Riker whispered, his gaze scanning the ruins. This could be a trap. But as the tremor subsided, a low hum filled the air. The stone beneath Elias's hand felt warm, and the symbols pulsed in time with his heartbeat. A door slid open in the wall before them, revealing a passageway leading deeper underground. Elias exchanged a look with Riker. "I think this is it. Whatever the ancient civilization was hiding, it's down there." Riker hesitated. "It could also be a Gyran ambush." Elias nodded. "We don't have a choice. If we're going to understand the energy and how to protect it, we need to go in." The team readied their weapons and moved cautiously into the passageway. The walls were lined with more symbols, and as they descended, the air grew cooler, the hum of energy growing louder. The passageway opened into a vast chamber, the ceiling high above them lost in shadows. In the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure, its surface glowing with the same blue light as the symbols on the tablet. The energy pulsed through it, filling the chamber with an otherworldly glow. "What is that?" one of the team members whispered. Elias stepped forward, the pull of the energy stronger than ever. "It's the core, or a part of it." Riker moved to his side, studying the structure. "This is what they're after." As Elias approached the crystal, the symbols on its surface began to shift, forming new patterns. He felt the energy pulling him closer, urging him to connect with it. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision before him. "Elias, be careful," Riker warned, his voice tense. "We don't know what this thing can do." Elias nodded, but couldn't resist the pull. He reached out, placing his hand on the crystal's surface. The moment he made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and the chamber lit up with a blinding flash. Visions flooded his mind, fragments of the ancient civilization's struggle, their desperate attempts to contain the energy's power. He saw them building the structures, creating the symbols as a way to channel and control the energy. And he saw the threat they faced, an invading force, not unlike the Gyran, but something darker, more destructive. Elias pulled back, gasping for breath as the visions faded. They were protecting the core from something powerful. Riker's eyes narrowed. "You think it's the Gyran?" Elias shook his head. "No, it's something worse. The Gyran are just following in the footsteps of whatever came before them. They're trying to harness the energy, but they don't understand the consequences." As he spoke, the crystal's light shifted, casting long shadows across the chamber. A low rumble echoed through the passageway they had come from, and the team tensed, weapons at the ready. "We've got company," Riker said, his voice low. The Gyran forces emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. They moved with precision, their eyes fixed on the crystal and the energy it held. "Hold your ground," Elias shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We can't let them take the core." The team opened fire, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Elias felt the energy of the planet thrumming beneath his feet, urging him to act. He reached out, tapping into the power of the crystal, feeling it surge through him. The Gyran advanced, but as Elias channeled the energy, the symbols on the walls lit up, creating a barrier of light that halted their progress. The Gyran soldiers hesitated, confusion flickering in their eyes, as they realized the energy was no longer under their control. Elias focused, his mind racing as he tried to understand the energy's intentions. "We can use it to push them back," he said, his voice strained. "But we need to be careful. This energy is powerful, too powerful." Riker nodded, his eyes locked on the advancing Gyran. "Do what you have to, Elias. We'll hold them off as long as we can." The battle intensified, but as Elias channeled the energy, the Gyran forces began to falter. The power of the crystal surged through him, and he felt a connection to the planet unlike anything he had ever experienced. But as the Gyran retreated, a new threat emerged from the shadows, an entity that seemed to be made of the same energy they had been fighting to protect. It hovered at the edge of the chamber, its form shifting and changing as if it were made of pure light. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. This was the true enemy, the force that the ancient civilization had fought against. And now it was awake. The entity of light shifted, its form almost mesmerizing as it floated between Elias and the Gyran forces. It flickered and pulsed, echoing the same energy that thrummed in Elias's veins, but with an intensity that felt both familiar and foreign. The Gyran soldiers halted, their weapons raised, but their eyes locked on the entity with what looked like reverence and fear. Elias could sense its power, and he felt the pull of the core intensify. This was what the ancient civilization had fought to contain, and now it had been unleashed. His hand still rested on the crystal, its energy flowing through him, connecting him to the planet's pulse. "Elias, what is that thing?" Riker's voice was a strained whisper, his eyes fixed on the entity. "It's what the ancients tried to hold back," Elias said, his voice steady but his mind racing. "It's part of the energy they harnessed, but it's alive, conscious." Riker's gaze snapped to Elias. "Conscious? You mean it's aware of us?" Elias nodded slowly. "And I think it's judging us." The Gyran leader, a massive figure with a scar running down his left eye, stepped forward, his weapon lowered. He spoke in a language that felt both harsh and melodic, each word resonating with the energy in the chamber. The entity reacted, its form coalescing into a more solid shape, an approximation of a humanoid figure, its eyes glowing bright blue. Elias could feel the entity's attention shift between him and the Gyran leader. It was as if it were weighing their intentions, assessing who had the right to control the energy of the core. "Riker," Elias said, "get the team back. This is about to get ugly." Riker hesitated, then nodded, signaling the others to retreat to the chamber's entrance. The tension in the air was palpable, the energy growing thicker as the entity floated closer. The Gyran soldiers stayed in formation, but their leader lowered his head, almost like a bow. Elias didn't miss the gesture. "They know what this is," he muttered. The Gyran leader raised his head, and his eyes locked onto Elias. He spoke again, this time in broken English. "This, Protector, Ancient One, it decides." "Decides what?" Elias asked, his grip on the core tightening. "Who controls?" the leader replied. "Who is worthy?" Elias's eyes narrowed. "You think you're worthy of this power. You've been attacking us from the start." The Gyran leader's expression remained unreadable. "We seek balance. You disrupt." Elias felt the energy pulse through him again, the crystal beneath his hand reacting to his emotions. "We're trying to protect this world, not destroy it, and if that means stopping you, then so be it." The entity flickered, and the chamber trembled as its form expanded, filling the space with a brilliant light. Symbols on the walls glowed in response, and Elias felt the power surge. The crystal beneath his hand vibrated, and for a moment he felt a presence enter his mind, a voice ancient and wise. The cycle repeats. Protectors rise and fall. Will you learn, or will you destroy as they did before? Elias struggled to maintain his focus. "We want to understand. We want to protect this place. But we need to know what happened here." The entity's light dimmed slightly, and the chamber's walls lit up, revealing more symbols and carvings. The images told a story of an ancient civilization, much like the one Elias had glimpsed before, harnessing the energy of the planet. They built the core to contain the energy's vast power, but they also knew it came at a cost. The energy wasn't just a resource, it was alive, and it demanded balance. But the images showed a conflict. Another force, similar to the Gyran, arrived, seeking to take control of the core. The civilization fought back, using the energy to drive their enemies away, but it unleashed chaos. The Protector, the entity before them, was created to maintain balance, to decide who could wield the power. Elias's heart pounded as he watched the story unfold. The protector wasn't just a guardian, it was a judge, and it had been awakened by their presence. "You see now," the Gyran leader said, his voice quieter. "We seek balance, you disturb it." Elias's grip on the crystal tightened. "We're not here to take the power, we're here to protect it. But if you're trying to take control, we can't let that happen." The Gyran leader's eyes flashed. "You do not understand. This energy, too powerful, dangerous." Riker stepped forward, his weapon still trained on the Gyran. "And you think you can handle it better than us?" The Gyran leader didn't reply, but the entity's form shifted again, and the ground beneath them trembled. The light from the crystal intensified, and Elias felt the energy's pull grow stronger. The entity was testing them, pushing them to make a choice. "Whatever we do, it's now or never," Riker said, his voice tense. Elias felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. The energy was alive, and it wanted balance, but balance didn't mean peace. The Gyran had their reasons for being here, but their methods were brutal, and their desire for control was clear. But as he stood there, the voice in his mind returned. "There is another way, but the cost is great." Elias knew what he had to do. "We won't fight for control, we'll fight for balance." He extended his hand, channeling the energy of the core. The light pulsed, and the entity seemed to acknowledge his choice. The Gyran leader watched, his expression guarded, as the chamber filled with energy. Elias felt the power surge through him, but he focused, keeping his mind clear. The symbols on the walls flared to life, and the entity moved closer, its form merging with the crystal. The energy swirled around them, and Elias could feel the balance shifting. The Gyran soldiers tensed, but their leader held up a hand, signaling them to wait. Elias took a deep breath, the energy thrumming in his veins as he directed it toward the entity. The power flowed through the crystal, connecting him to the ancient structure and the planet itself. The chamber shuddered as the energy stabilized, and the entity's light dimmed. The Gyran leader stepped back, his eyes narrowing. "You choose balance, we respect." Elias's eyes met the leader's. "This isn't over. If you try to take control again, we'll be ready." The Gyran leader nodded once before retreating with his soldiers. The entity's form faded into the crystal, and the chamber's light dimmed, returning to its natural state. Riker exhaled, lowering his weapon. "That was close." Elias nodded, his gaze lingering on the crystal. "Too close. But it's not over. The entity will judge us again, and we need to be ready when it does." As the team regrouped, Elias knew they had only scratched the surface of the ancient civilization's secrets. The core was a source of power and life, but it was also a test, one they had only begun to understand. The real battle was just beginning. The air inside the command center was thick with tension. Every pair of eyes was glued to the rapidly shifting data streams on the wall, the alien script blinking erratically as it tried to make sense of the escalating situation. The high-pitched hum of the scanners pulsed in sync with the low, throaty growls of Earth's wildlife playing over the audio feed, an unholy chorus of predators that had turned their gaze toward the hunters. And one by one, the alien teams were going silent. Captain Jakar leaned forward, his fist clenched so tight the gray skin of his knuckles had turned white. He stared at the holographic map of the southern forest zone, where the last known coordinates of their primary hunting squad had been recorded. A crackling buzz of static replaced their voices an hour ago. "Tell me this is a malfunction," he said, his voice low and dangerous, the kind of tone that could spark fear in even the most hardened soldiers. Lieutenant Aresh shook his head, his quills twitching in what could only be described as discomfort. "It's not the tech. We've run diagnostics 3 times. The wildlife, they've changed." "Changed?" Jakar's eyes narrowed. "We knew they were evolving fast, but not this fast." Aresh swallowed, his throat dry. "Sir, it's not just evolution. It's strategic, coordinated." The room went dead silent. Captain Jakar stepped closer, looming over the control panel. "Coordinated?" Are you telling me the wildlife on this planet is organizing? It's the only explanation, Arash replied, keeping his voice steady. The predators are acting in unison. They've adapted to the hunts, and now they're turning the tables on us. We underestimated them. Jakar slammed his fist against the control panel, causing a spark to jump from one of the screens. This was supposed to be a controlled environment, not a damn death trap. We're the apex here, not them. But even as he said the words, Jakar knew they rang hollow. Reports of inexplicable patterns, of traps being set by creatures previously thought to have no such capability, had been pouring in for weeks now. It started small, creatures circling the perimeters of hunting camps, just out of range, watching. Then came the first ambush, a team of elite hunters brought down by a pack of wolves that had used their surroundings to cut off all escape routes. There had been no survivors. "Sir, another team just went dark," a technician called from across the room, his voice trembling. "Zone 14. Same as the others. No warning, just gone." Jakar's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the map. Red markers blinked across the zones where squads had vanished. What was once a controlled operation had devolved into a war of attrition, with the aliens losing ground fast. And something told him they hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. Arash stepped forward. "We need to pull out, Captain. We're not equipped to deal with this level of unpredictability. Whatever's happening out there, it's beyond our control." Jakar stared at the hologram, knowing Arash was right. Yet retreating would mean admitting failure, a blow to their pride and to the mission. And yet, "What's our tactical response?" Jakar asked, buying himself time to think. Arash hesitated before speaking. "We could deploy the atmospheric suppressor drones, force the wildlife into dormancy, at least long enough to extract the remaining teams. And if that fails?" Arash met his captain's gaze, a cold certainty behind his eyes. "Then we're dealing with a full-scale retreat." The words hung heavy in the air. Retreat. It was an unthinkable move for a species as proud and technologically advanced as theirs. But with each second that passed, more red markers blinked on the map, and their hold on the planet slipped further. Jakar exhaled through his nose, his mind racing. "Fine. Deploy the drones. Pull back our teams from the outer sectors. We can regroup at the central compound and assess the situation from there." "Yes, sir," Arash responded, moving to execute the orders. But just as his claws hovered over the controls, the overhead lights flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. A low rumble shook the ground beneath them. "What the—" Jakar spun toward the windows, his gaze locking onto the forest line in the distance. A wave of movement rippled through the trees, the undergrowth swaying violently as something massive made its way toward them. And then they saw it. Emerging from the shadow of the trees was a creature unlike anything they had encountered. Towering over the treetops, its form was a twisted amalgamation of Earth's most dangerous predators. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence far beyond that of any mindless beast. And in its wake, smaller creatures followed, silent, coordinated, and deadly. For a split second, there was only stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. "All units, prepare for an attack," Jakar barked, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of the approaching horde. In the blink of an eye, the compound was under siege. Automated turrets fired at will, but the beasts were too fast, too organized. They swarmed the outer defenses, dismantling them with terrifying efficiency. Jakar drew his sidearm, his mind racing. This wasn't just a hunt gone wrong, this was war. A war they hadn't prepared for. He glanced at Arash, who stood frozen in place, eyes wide with fear. "Arash, get the evac protocols online." Arash snapped out of his daze, fingers flying over the control panel, but it was too late. The creatures were already inside the perimeter. As the first wave hit, the command center doors buckled under the pressure. Jakar aimed his weapon at the entrance, knowing full well it wouldn't be enough to stop them. But he fired anyway. The compound was a war zone, Alarms blared, red lights casting eerie shadows as soldiers scrambled to hold back the unrelenting tide of Earth's creatures. Automated turrets fired in rapid bursts, but the beasts had grown too cunning. They knew when to strike and where to evade. Smoke filled the air, mingling with the sounds of gunfire, the roar of engines, and the terrifying cries of the creatures that breached the perimeter. Captain Jakar moved through the chaos, barking orders at his crew. His eyes scanned the monitors displaying a live feed of the compound's outer defenses. Each screen showed the same thing, their lines crumbling as creatures, moving with unnatural precision, overran positions. "Status on the atmospheric suppressor drones?" he yelled into his comms. "We've launched them, sir," Horesh's voice crackled back. "They're moving into position, but it's going to take a few minutes for the gas to disperse." Jakar swore under his breath. Minutes they didn't have. The beasts were already clawing at the command center's outer wall, and he could feel the building shudder with each impact. He slammed his fist into the console. "We hold them here. No one retreats until those drones are in full effect." Outside, the creatures seemed to sense the change. The giant amalgamation beast that had appeared earlier loomed at the edge of the forest line, its massive body absorbing the bursts of plasma fire like it was nothing more than rain. Smaller predators, sleek and agile, darted in and out of the compound's defenses, exploiting every gap with terrifying efficiency. Jakar watched as a squad of his best soldiers, equipped with state-of-the-art exosuits, attempted to flank the beast. They moved with precision, circling it with coordinated fire. But as they closed in, something unexpected happened. The beast's eyes glowed a deep blue, and the ground beneath it shifted, as if the earth itself was under its command. Roots and vines shot up from the ground, coiling around the soldiers and dragging them down. "What in the name of?" Jakar whispered, eyes wide. He had expected a fight, but not this. The planet itself was fighting back, and it was using everything at its disposal. "Sir," Horesh's voice was louder now, panic creeping in. "We have a bigger problem. The drones. They're being taken down." Jakar's blood ran cold. "Explain." Horesh's screen showed the live feed from the drones. Creatures, large, winged predators, were launching themselves at the drones, ripping them apart mid-air. Jakar watched as one drone's feed went dark, followed by another and another. "We're losing them all, sir. The gas won't deploy." Jakar clenched his teeth. "Damn it! How are they anticipating our every move?" "It's like they know our tactics," Horesh muttered, his eyes darting between screens. "Every countermeasure we deploy, they adapt." Jakar felt the knot in his stomach tighten. This was no longer about hunting wildlife. This was survival against an enemy that was thinking several steps ahead. He realized that they were up against more than just evolution. Something, or someone, was guiding the creatures, turning Earth's ecosystem into a weapon against them. "Prepare to evacuate the command center," he ordered. "We'll regroup at the secondary base." Horesh's quills bristled. "Sir, if we retreat now, we'll lose control of the compound." "If we stay, we'll lose everything," Jakar snapped. "Get the teams ready. I want every soldier out in 5 minutes." As Horesh relayed the orders, Jakar moved to the central control panel and activated the data purge sequence. The command center systems hummed as sensitive information was wiped clean. He couldn't risk their technology falling into the hands of an enemy they didn't understand. Suddenly, the main screen flickered. At first, he thought it was a malfunction, but then a pattern appeared, an intricate network of lines and symbols, forming an image. Jakar frowned. It looked like a map, but not of their compound. This was something different, older. "Horesh, get over here. What's this?" Horesh stared at the screen, confusion etched on his face. It's not our tech, sir. It's something encoded." The image expanded, showing a vast network beneath the Earth's surface, tunnels, connections, and nodes. At the center was a glowing point, pulsing with energy. "What is that?" Jakar asked. Horesh hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "It looks like an energy source. but it's enormous. Jakar's eyes narrowed. Is that what's controlling the wildlife? I don't know, sir. But whatever it is, it's beneath us, deep underground. Jakar's mind raced. Could this be the key to understanding why the wildlife had turned on them? Was this the source of their newfound intelligence and coordination? Before he could ask more, a deafening crash echoed through the command center. The outer wall buckled, and creatures poured in, their eyes glowing with a malicious, calculated intent. Time's up. Move, 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 Jakar yelled, pulling his weapon as the first wave of beasts breached the command center. Plasma fire lit up the room, but the creatures pressed forward, unrelenting. Aresh ducked under a console, firing at a wolf-like predator that leaped at him. Captain, we need to go, now. Jakar fired a few more shots before retreating, backing toward the emergency exit. Fall back, we'll regroup at the secondary base. As they fought their way through the compound's corridors, Jakar couldn't shake the image of the underground network from his mind. Whatever they were dealing with, it wasn't just a simple mutation. Earth itself had become a battlefield, and he knew they were running out of time. But one thing was certain. If they didn't find that underground source and shut it down, their entire mission, their very survival, was at risk. Jakar and Aresh moved swiftly through the compound's labyrinthine corridors. The emergency sirens wailed as the metallic walls shuddered under the force of the creature's relentless assault. The creature's roars echoed, amplified by the narrow passages, turning each corner into a potential death trap. Jakar gripped his plasma rifle tightly, his eyes darting to every shadow. We're almost there, he muttered, checking the map on his wrist display. Secondary evac point is just up ahead. Aresh's eyes flickered with concern as they approached the heavily armored blast doors separating the command center from the exit. If they get through these doors, we'll be trapped, he said, his voice low but tense. Jakar nodded. I know. He keyed in the access code, and the massive doors groaned as they began to slide open. We make our stand here if it comes to that. The moment the doors opened, the sounds of the battle outside grew louder. The perimeter defenses were falling one by one, and the creatures' war cries echoed through the night. The compound's outer walls, which had once seemed like impenetrable fortresses, were now crumbling as clawed beasts and larger, monstrous creatures smashed into them. They stepped through, sealing the door behind them. The secondary evac zone was just beyond, a heavily fortified hangar designed for emergencies. A group of soldiers was already assembled, gearing up for what looked like a last stand. They exchanged nervous glances as Jakar and Aresh approached. Report, Jakar demanded. Lieutenant Saska, a battle-hardened officer with scars crisscrossing her arms, stepped forward. Captain, we've lost all communication with the perimeter teams. The enemy is inside our defenses. The compound's integrity is compromised. Jakar's jaw clenched. What about the evac ships? Saska shook her head. No good. The creatures have figured out how to target them mid-takeoff. We tried sending a squad to secure the launch pad, but they didn't make it. Jakar took a deep breath. All right. Plan B. We hold this position until we can regroup with the reinforcements from Sector 6. We'll form a defensive line and... Before he could finish, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Monitors mounted on the walls flickered, showing distorted images of the exterior. The creatures weren't just attacking the compound, they were burrowing. They're tunneling underneath us, Aresh shouted, his eyes wide with realization. Reinforce the floors, Jakar barked. Deploy the seismic charges. We can't let them breach from below. Saska and her team moved quickly, planting charges along the metallic floor panels. The charges would release shockwaves designed to collapse tunnels, but they were a temporary measure. If the creatures kept advancing, they'd soon be surrounded. As Jakar monitored their progress, his mind returned to the map they'd seen on the central console, the underground network with its pulsating core. It was clear now, the creatures weren't acting randomly. They were organized, and whatever was guiding them knew the compound's vulnerabilities. He pulled Aresh aside. That map we saw, there's something underground, and it's pulling the strings. We need to find a way to access it. Aresh frowned. The tunnels go deep. We'd need to get past the swarm outside, and even then, there's no telling what's waiting for us down there. Jakar glanced at the soldiers, their faces tense but determined. It's a risk we have to take. We can't keep fighting them like this. We're outnumbered, and they're outthinking us. If we can locate the source and shut it down, we might turn the tide. Aresh nodded, though hesitation lingered in his eyes. All right, but we'll need a team. A small one. Moving through the tunnels will be dangerous. Jakar turned to Saska. Lieutenant, gather 3 of your best. We're going underground. She didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. She motioned for 2 soldiers, Vrak and Irel, both veterans from the jungle skirmishes, and they joined the group, checking their weapons and armor. Everyone ready? Jakar asked, meeting their eyes one by one. Yes, sir, they responded in unison, their faces hardened with resolve. Aresh activated the access panel, opening a hatch in the floor that led into the darkness below. This maintenance tunnel should connect to the main network. Jakar nodded. Let's move. We don't have much time. The group descended into the tunnel, leaving the noise of the battle behind. The air grew cold, and the walls narrowed, forcing them into a single file. The flickering lights on their helmets cast long, eerie shadows as they navigated the winding paths. Jakar's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his eyes forward. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The deeper they went, the more alien the environment became. The metal walls of the maintenance tunnel gave way to a mix of soil and strange, pulsating organic matter, like the planet itself was morphing. The creatures had been down here, building something. It was as if they were reshaping the Earth's very foundation. Stay sharp, Jakar whispered. We're not alone. As if on cue, a low growl echoed through the tunnel. The team stopped, weapons raised, scanning the darkness. The tunnel split into multiple paths, each one shrouded in thick, twisting vines. We split up, Jakar ordered. Saska, take Vrak and cover the left. Aresh, Irel, and I will take the right. We'll regroup at the next junction. Saska nodded, signaling her team to move. They vanished into the left tunnel, their lights flickering in the distance until they disappeared completely. Jakar, Aresh, and Irel pushed forward, their steps cautious but quick. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, the walls lined with biolite plants and more of the pulsating organic matter. In the center, a creature, larger than anything they'd seen before, stood motionless. Its eyes glowed a faint blue, the same hue they'd seen in the larger beasts above ground. Hold fire, Jakar whispered. Let's see if we can get around it. The team moved quietly, skirting the edge of the chamber. As they passed, the creature's eyes tracked them, unblinking. Irel tightened his grip on his rifle, but Jakar motioned for him to stay calm. They needed to avoid a fight if they could. They reached the far end of the chamber when suddenly a loud crash echoed from the tunnel Saska had taken. The creature roared, its eyes flashing bright as it turned towards them, muscles tensing. Go, 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 Jakar shouted, and the team sprinted into the next tunnel just as the beast lunged. Claws scraped against the walls as it pursued, its roars deafening in the enclosed space. Jakar fired a burst of plasma shots, aiming for the beast's legs to slow it down. The blast hit, but the creature barely flinched. Aresh, Irel, keep moving. We can't let it pin us here. The tunnel curved sharply, leading into another junction. They dove into a side passage, ducking behind a cluster of rocks. The beast thundered past, its heavy footsteps echoing as it continued down the main path. Aresh exhaled, his quills bristling. That was too close. Jakar nodded, checking his ammo. We need to find that source before we're completely overrun. The passage opened into a vast underground cavern. At its center was the glowing node they'd seen on the map, a massive, pulsating structure embedded in the earth. It was surrounded by a tangled web of roots and veins, all connected to the walls and ceiling. "This is it," Aresh whispered. "The energy source." Jakar's eyes narrowed. "We destroy it. If this is what's controlling the wildlife, we take it out and hope it disrupts their coordination." Iroh began setting charges around the base of the node. These explosives should be enough to destabilize it. But as they worked, the ground trembled and the walls shuddered. The creatures were coming, and they were closing in fast. "Hurry up," Jakar urged, his eyes scanning the tunnel entrances for movement. Just as Iroh finished planting the last charge, the creatures poured into the cavern. They moved as one, their eyes glowing in unison, their movements too coordinated to be anything other than directed. "Hold the line," Jakar shouted, opening fire. Plasma bolts lit up the chamber, but the creatures surged forward, undeterred. Aresh threw a grenade, the explosion ripping through the front line of beasts. But it wasn't enough. They kept coming. Iroh finished arming the charges. "Ready." "Fall back," Jakar ordered. "Detonate on my mark." The team retreated into the tunnel, firing as they went. The creatures followed, claws scraping and teeth snapping. Jakar counted the seconds, waiting until they were clear. Now. Iroh hit the detonator, and the cavern erupted. The shockwave slammed through the tunnel, knocking them off their feet. The tunnel walls groaned as debris rained down, sealing the entrance. Jakar pulled himself up, his ears ringing. "Status." Aresh helped Iroh to his feet. "We're clear." But the tunnels collapsed. "We'll need another way out." Jakar checked his map. "There's another exit further ahead. Let's move." As they navigated through the winding paths, Jakar felt a sense of unease. They'd destroyed the node, but the creatures had been too coordinated. Something else was at play, and they were running out of time to figure it out. The exit was just ahead, a faint light shining through the tunnel's end. But as they approached, they heard a voice, a whisper carried on the wind. It was faint, but it was there. "You are not alone." Jakar froze. "Did you hear that?" Aresh nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness. "It's coming from below." Jakar felt a chill run down his spine. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, echoing in his mind. There was something beneath them, something ancient, intelligent, and very much aware of their presence. "We need to get out of here, now." They broke into a sprint, the light of the exit growing brighter. But as they reached the surface, the whispering ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. The battle above had stopped. Jakar looked out over the compound. The creatures had retreated, their bodies littered across the battlefield, motionless. The aliens' defenses still stood, but the absence of movement was eerie. "What's going on?" Aresh asked. Jakar's grip tightened on his weapon. "I don't know, but whatever it is, we're going to find out." The compound stood in eerie silence, the once cacophonous sounds of battle now replaced by the unsettling quiet of a battlefield left in the wake of retreat. Jakar stood at the edge of the perimeter, eyes scanning the horizon, the stillness almost unbearable. His grip tightened around his plasma rifle as he surveyed the broken landscape, littered with the bodies of both alien defenders and the twisted, savage forms of the creatures they had fought. Something was wrong. The silence was a trap, a prelude to something far worse than they had yet faced. "Captain." Aresh's voice cut through the silence, his expression as grim as the battlefield before them. "The creatures have pulled back, but they haven't left. They're regrouping underground. Our scanners are picking up massive seismic activity, more than before." Jakar nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "They're building up for something bigger. We destroyed one node, but it wasn't enough. Whatever this is, it's adapting." Lieutenant Saska approached, her expression serious. "We've reinforced the defenses, but if they hit us again, I'm not sure we'll be able to hold. The men are tired, supplies are low. We need a plan, Captain." Jakar exhaled slowly. "We don't have the luxury of defense anymore. We need to strike at the source." Aresh frowned. "The underground network is vast. We don't even know where to begin." Jakar's eyes narrowed. We do now. He gestured to his wrist display, which showed a map of the subterranean structure. In the center was a massive, pulsating node, a much larger version of what they had destroyed earlier. Saska's eyes widened. That's right beneath us. It's the central hive. Jakar nodded. Whatever intelligence is controlling the creatures, it's there. We take it out, or we die here. The silence that followed was heavy, but no one spoke up to protest. They all knew the stakes. Gather every able body we have left. We're going in, Jakar ordered. We'll split into 2 teams, one to engage the creatures on the surface and draw their attention, the other to breach the underground hive. Aresh and Saska exchanged glances, their resolve firm. We're with you, Captain, Aresh said. Let's end this. The teams moved quickly. The surface squad, led by Saska, fortified positions around the compound, their weapons trained on the darkness beyond. Jakar led the underground assault team, Aresh, Iril, and 5 other soldiers, all armed to the teeth and prepared for the worst. The entrance they had used before had collapsed, so they blasted open a new one. The descent was tense, the air thickening with every step as they delved into the earth. The tunnel walls pulsed with the same strange organic growth they'd encountered before, but now it was thicker, more alive. The faint, rhythmic thumping of the hive node grew louder as they approached. Stay sharp, Jakar whispered, leading the way. They know we're coming. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern. Biolite plants light the chamber, casting a sickly green glow over the twisted, organic structures that sprawled from floor to ceiling. At the center, pulsating and alive, was the massive node, a tangled mass of roots, veins, and alien technology intertwined. Aresh's eyes widened. This is it. Jakar's gaze was locked on the node. It pulsed with energy, each beat sending waves of power rippling through the cavern. Plant the charges. We take it out now. The soldiers spread out, moving quickly to plant explosives around the base of the node. But as they worked, the walls began to shift. Shapes emerged from the shadows, creatures, dozens of them, their eyes glowing blue in the dim light. They're here, Iril shouted, raising his weapon. Hold them off, Jakar ordered, opening fire. Plasma shots light the chamber as the creatures charged. The team formed a defensive circle around the node, holding their ground as the beasts surged forward. Jakar fought with precision, each shot aimed to slow the creatures, but they kept coming, claws and teeth flashing in the light. The ground shook as more creatures poured into the cavern, their numbers seemingly endless. Aresh fought beside Jakar, felling beast after beast, but the tide was overwhelming. Captain, Iril shouted from across the cavern. The charges are set. Jakar nodded. Fall back to the exit. We blow it once we're clear. The team retreated, firing as they moved, but the creatures pressed harder, as if sensing the desperation of their attackers. Jakar gritted his teeth, firing at the nearest beast as he covered the team's escape. They were almost at the tunnel when a massive roar shook the cavern. From the depths emerged a colossal creature, its body covered in thick, chitinous armor. It moved with terrifying speed, barreling through the ranks of its own kind as it charged directly at them. Move, Jakar shouted, shoving Aresh forward. Go. The team sprinted for the tunnel, the ground trembling as the colossal beast crashed through the cavern. Jakar fired a volley of plasma shots at its legs, but the creature barely slowed. It was too fast, too large. Aresh stopped, turning to face the creature as it closed in. Jakar, it's going for the charges. Jakar's eyes widened. If the creature reached the node before they detonated the explosives, it could defuse them. No, we blow it now. He slammed his hand on the detonator. The cavern shook as the charges went off, the blast tearing through the node and the creatures around it. The shockwave knocked Jakar and Aresh off their feet, and debris rained down as the cavern began to collapse. Get up! We have to move, Jakar shouted, pulling Aresh to his feet. The tunnel behind them was crumbling, chunks of rock falling as they ran. They sprinted through the narrow passage, the rumble of the collapsing cavern following them. Just as they reached the surface, the tunnel entrance caved in, sealing the path behind them. They emerged into the open air, the cold night a stark contrast to the chaos below. "Did it work?" Aresh panted, turning to Jakar. Jakar watched the ground, waiting. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a low, rumbling sound echoed from below. The earth shifted, and the compound trembled as the creatures on the surface suddenly convulsed, their bodies twitching before collapsing, lifeless. "It's over," Jakar said, his voice quiet. The soldiers who had been fighting on the surface lowered their weapons, staring in disbelief at the fallen creatures. The alien wildlife, once so coordinated and lethal, lay scattered across the battlefield, inert and harmless. Saska approached, her expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "The creatures, they just stopped. We did it." Jakar nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the ground. "We stopped them, but something still doesn't add up. That node, it wasn't just a control center, it felt like it was alive." Aresh's brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Captain?" Jakar turned to him, a grim look on his face. "I think we only destroyed a part of it. There's something deeper, something still down there." Before he could say more, a distant roar echoed from the horizon. Jakar's eyes narrowed. The creatures were dead, but the threat wasn't over. The roar was different, deeper, and more powerful. Whatever it was moving fast, and it was headed their way. "We need to regroup and reinforce the compound," Jakar said. "This isn't over." Several hours later, the compound's defenses had been fortified, the soldiers standing ready as they awaited the new threat. The roar grew louder, shaking the very foundations of the base. Jakar stood on the ramparts, his eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, he saw it, a massive, serpentine form, its scales glistening under the moonlight. The creature was like nothing they'd faced before. It moved with purpose, its massive body slithering across the landscape, crushing everything in its path. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light, the same light they'd seen in the creatures below. "That's it," Jakar said. "The real source." Aresh stared in horror. "How do we fight that?" Jakar's eyes hardened. "We don't. We lead it away." He turned to Saska. "Prepare the transports. We're going to lure it out of the area. We have one shot at this." Saska nodded, rallying the soldiers. Jakar and Aresh climbed into one of the armored transports, its engines roaring to life. They raced out of the compound, heading directly towards the massive beast. It turned its gaze towards them, its eyes locking onto the vehicle. "Come on, you monster," Jakar muttered, gripping the controls. "Follow us." The transport weaved through the landscape, the colossal creature chasing them. It smashed through trees and rocks, its massive body coiling as it moved. Jakar led it towards a canyon, the same one the team had first encountered during the initial attack. As they reached the edge, Jakar accelerated, the transport speeding along the narrow path. The creature followed, its massive bulk squeezing through the canyon walls. "Now!" Jakar shouted. Aresh detonated the charges they'd planted earlier. The canyon walls crumbled, collapsing onto the creature's body and pinning it beneath tons of rock. The ground shook as the beast let out a final, thunderous roar before going silent. Jakar and Aresh watched as the dust settled, the creature's massive form trapped beneath the rubble. It lay still, the blue light in its eyes flickering before fading completely. "It's done," Jakar said, exhaling. Aresh nodded, but his expression remained serious. "Let's hope this was really the end." The compound was quiet, the soldiers tending to the wounded and reinforcing the base. The alien landscape, once teeming with life, was now calm. Jakar stood alone, staring out over the horizon. The battle was over, but the questions remained. What were these creatures? Who, or what, had created the nodes, and why had they attacked in the first place? As the sun rose, he knew the answers would come, but for now, they had survived. Humanity had shown its resilience, its will to fight against overwhelming odds. and the hunt was far from over.